Sharia courts. So these are hospitals that had been militarized. But the Western corporate media would have you believe that big bad Syria and big bad Russia were just wantonly destroying hospitals for the hell of it. And when you think about it, I mean, even if you want to believe that ridiculous and absurd logic, it doesn't make sense, because why would a state want to destroy its own hospitals, which it is then going to have to rebuild? And it is doing so. Every area that is liberated of the presence of these terrorist factions, immediately the rebuilding process starts. And it's the burden is on Syria and whatever allies choose to work with Syria.
So it's both incredible and kind of unsurprising at the same time. So when we're reading in Western media that Assad is blowing up hospitals or Assad gassed his own people, it almost always is that the reverse is true. But I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. Like, why would you at any point, I'm sorry, that's a different question. When you say, this is what happened, I went to Aleppo, I went to Dada, I saw this with my own 2 eyes, RT did this, they're reporting from this. When you report that, you're painted as an Assad sympathizer. If you go and visit Bashar al-Assad, your 2 eyes, RT did this, Assad sympathizer. And it's a grotesque attack on accurate journalism. So thank you for going and doing what you do. I appreciate that very much.
Well, I mean, that whole, like, all the various terms around President Assad, Assadist, Assad sympathizer, Assad apologist, all these ridiculous terms. Let me ask these people that sling these terms. If I had gone and met with, for example, President Obama when he was a president, would people have said that about me? Would they have said, you're an Obama apologist? Of course not. Would they say that about, they might say that about Trump, I don't know. But my point is, this is, it's meant to be a derogatory term. And it's solely reserved for the heads of states of countries that the U.S. is warring upon, right? But in any case, I mean, applying for a visa, paying for my visa, paying for all my expenses, traveling on my own, traveling without the security that corporate media are afforded, with, you know, because they have the money to do so, doing all the logistics, doing all the legwork on my own. And most of my reporting doesn't even include the mention of the president. It's about talking with civilians in affected areas. And another thing is, I'm sure you know, that in Syria, in government-controlled areas, government-secured areas, you have millions of internal refugees. And these include families of terrorists who are waging war against the state. And they're being afforded the same services that any civilian gets. But corporate media doesn't talk about this. So if I go to the province of Latakia or Tartus, or even Damascus, just Damascus, the capital alone, you will find, in these areas, you'll find millions of people from around Syria. And so what corporate media effectively has done is say, these people's voices don't matter. The only voices that matter are the ones that are in the rebel, quote unquote, controlled areas. And we're going to solely give them any sort of legitimacy, and everybody else can screw off, you know? That's essentially what they're doing. But, you know, just to look at New York Times again, because it popped into my head when I mentioned them earlier. When Eastern Ghouta was being liberated, I remember writing a piece for RT, who, by the way, RT has not censored me. And if I tried to write any of what I write for Canadian media, CBC or something like that, they would butcher it. They would either not publish it or they would butcher it. But this piece I wrote for RT, it was looking at war propaganda on Eastern Ghouta around the time that Ghouta was being liberated. I don't remember if it was before the alleged hoax attack, but in any case, I looked at a couple of New York Times articles, and literally all their sources were either unnamed sources, media activists, or if they had actually named the people, a very quick, 1 minute look on Facebook would reveal that these sources put forth as credible neutral sources had allegiances to Jaish al-Islam, which was one of the groups that was dominating Eastern Ghouta, particularly Douma, or to al-Nusra. And so how in the world can you, the same papers that would say I'm not credible because I go on my own to this country and I interview civilians and I take videos, of their words. The same media will say these sources who clearly have allegiance to terrorists are credible. I mean, this is how upside down not their perspective. This is how upside down the reality is, because I don't believe for a moment that they're mistaken. They're deliberately, obviously, misinforming people.
We know from the OPCW leaks through WikiLeaks that the State Department pushed a narrative and that they worked backwards from a conclusion around the evidence in order to come to the one that they did in the final OPCW report. This is essentially what's going on with media as well. There's a State Department directive, and then the journalists work backward from the conclusion in order to support it. It's why we need a WikiLeaks. That's why we need a WikiLeaks at full strength. That's why we need a field of independent journalists like you that go out and do this work and come back with a serene shin, as you know, as recognition of it. Given how close we are to the beginning of the extradition hearing, do you see a coalition of independent journalists building in order to support Julian Assange? And do you think that can kind of flow over into more corporate areas, even with the Guardian's like sort of weird cover your own ass op-ed they released over the weekend?
Oh, I did not see that. I tend to avoid looking at the Guardian. It causes me bodily pain all over.
It hurts.
So yeah. And to be honest, like I'm not that well versed on Assange. Obviously, I support his freedom, and I support that obviously that journalists should not be persecuted. But I'm not fine-tuned into his case, so I couldn't speak to whether or not there's a coalition. I do know in a couple of weeks in London there's going to be a panel featuring a number of prominent anti-war voices. I'll be joining that to speak on various issues relating to media freedom. And of course, Assange will be a prime focus of this meeting. On the note of whether or not corporate media, again, without having read the Guardian piece, whether or not corporate media would address it, well, I'm sure you're aware that in July, I think it was summer last year in the UK, there's the Media Freedom Conference that was co-hosted by Nazi granddaughter of the Nazi collaborator, Chrystia Freeland, granddaughter of the Nazi collaborator, and Jeremy Hunt. Anyway, Assange was not a part of the schedule, and I remember there was one journalist, I forget the guy's name. He was able to at least ask Hunt about Assange, and Hunt said no comment. Right. So I can't personally see that this would suddenly become a priority for them to cover because they've been relentlessly slandering him, right? But perhaps I'm wrong, but I don't, I really don't think so. But I mean, obviously, like I would think that the support amongst concerned people, sorry, I would think that support is at least growing.
So fortunately, we have seen with the espionage charges, which we learned of those later in May, I believe. So it was before this conference took place, because I know what you're referring to. Yeah. Fortunately, we did see mainstream media actually start to support Julian. Of course, we would like to see them do that a lot more. But fortunately, more people are starting to really show support for him. And activist groups in Australia are working really hard, and in New Zealand as well. But yes, it's a big point of what we do to educate people on this issue and to talk about this. Can you talk a little bit about your event that you're going to be speaking at in London, just briefly, and then we'll get back to your work. But just for everybody who's watching in the UK, if they want to attend that, they can.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I actually don't know all the details. It's still being ironed out. All I can say that it will be, I think it's like the weekend around February 23rd or 4th or something in London, but other details I'm not aware of. And I don't feel I can, divulge the organizers. He might not want at this point to name, who's going to be participating. I would note though, last year when I was in Iceland, I interviewed a man named Ögmundur Jóhannesson. He was the Minister of Interior in Iceland and also Minister of Health and Justice. And we spoke about Assange, and he has some very strong supportive words. So I can send you that link if you want. But it's at least, I'm sure there's maybe a couple other people who had some sort of political position that have spoken out. But it was very refreshing to see him take such a principled stance.
So one of the big things we like to talk about here is ways that we can build accountability for the people that have committed the war crimes, for the actors involved in literally destabilizing governments. what are some ways that you think individual people could demand accountability? Like, what do you think would be effective for the people who know this information to act to try to bring accountability for the situations?
I don't know that I have a good answer for that. For example, like, I know people write letters to the editor and that has some sort of effect. But some of these major papers don't even allow a comment section. Like the last time I checked, The Guardian doesn't allow a comment section. So how can you hold them accountable if they're not allowing people to give feedback? Or actually, an article I wrote somewhat recently was looking at the social media restrictions and censorship and complete blacklisting or, deplatforming of people that have critical voices and concerns. And one thing I noticed when I was writing that, you probably already know this, but like Twitter was introducing a means to determine the audience of who could reply to your tweets in advance. So you could set it to just kind of like Facebook friends only or whatever. So to me, it just sounded like Twitter's introducing a feature to make it an echo chamber so that war propagandists can backslap each other and then concerned and critical voices can't have a say. So it's not, unfortunately, that isn't a positive, reply to your question. But I have to say also, like, I was in Gaza when Israel used white phosphorus on civilians, and they used it widely. It's a war crime. And they used, I believe they used dime on civilians, and they used dart bombs on civilians and on medics. And they have never been held accountable. Israeli soldiers point blank assassinated children. So it's for me I don't have a positive. I wish I did, but I don't have an optimistic answer. Although I would like to hear yours, because in my experience, the criminals are never held accountable.
Well, my hope through doing the vigils and through having people like you on and having different content creators on and having different people from different sections of independent media on is to break the echo chamber, essentially, or at least as much as we can by funneling truthful information through one point. The hope, though, is that we can build an air of accountability, that we can get people accustomed and essentially predisposed to standing up to injustice. And that's why, since the very beginning, we've promoted the idea of just literally doing anything. Just
Right.
going out in the street and putting signs up on a telephone pole, even if you feel like you're just screaming into the wind. Because over time, you lose that sense of, well, what can I do about it? Because you
True.
start to begin thinking, what can I do about it? And that's, to me, that's where it starts, because I don't have an answer really, because this is something that we've talked about behind the scenes a whole lot, is how to build accountability and make people feel like they can hold someone responsible. And I think a lot of it is just starting somewhere and driving it home. Just being willing when you know that there is an injustice happening to stand up to it. And even if it's at first really awkward and you don't want to keep doing it, eventually you push through and it becomes this thing where taking an action becomes almost like a form of yoga or a type of meditation, because it's just you in that moment fighting for something that hopefully the rest of the world will start to care about.
Yeah, and actually I can add on to that. I really like what you said. Back in at the beginning of the war on Syria, if we just look at that issue, there were few journalists that were willing to write something that wasn't with the NATO narrative, that were willing to question or counter the NATO narrative. One of the journalists that was doing so was Sharmeen Narwani, and she was kind of standing alone and taking a beating from people for her actually going to Syria, actually investigating, writing critically on, what we were told was happening versus what was happening. And then, a couple of years later, independent investigative journalist Cory Morningstar, she was, the first to really start digging into the white helmets. And this was, at that time, taboo to touch the issue of the white helmets. Then Vanessa and myself started looking, and then Vanessa Beeley, I'm sure you know of, went heads on digging into the white helmets and exposing them. So these are all examples of people who were doing it on their own, taking a beating. I mean, I've taken my share of slander and abuse, but kept going because we knew it was the right thing to do. And we knew what we were talking about was honest and truthful. And with time, for example, in 2016, when the media was saying Aleppo had fallen, well, now with time, you can see, actually, no, what the Syrian media were reporting, what Russian journalists were reporting, what Syrian civilians were reporting, what independent journalists were reporting actually was true. Aleppo did not fall, it was liberated. So just to kind of tap onto or echo what you're saying, like, yeah, it sometimes can be challenging or like intimidating perhaps for people to think, oh, well, if I do this, then this will happen, or someone will criticize me, or someone will call me a blah, 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 isks, you know, but in the end, like if you know what you're fighting for is the just thing to fight for, then let them call, you know, let them slander, whatever, it doesn't matter. So I appreciate what you said.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, and honestly, I really hope that more people start doing what you're doing. That more people start putting themselves out there simply to know for themselves and to share with other people what's going on. Because without people like you, in those times that these things are happening, we would have no real idea of what's happening behind the veils of propaganda. So I just want to give a big thank you to you for all of the work that you've done and everything that you're going to continue to do.
Thank you. And I'd like to just also like thank it might sound cheesy or corny, but really honestly thank the Syrian people who have had, you know, the most powerful nations in the world warring upon them. And they stood with their country, they stood with their leadership, they stood with their army, because they are the army. And all the worst war propaganda, some of the worst war propaganda has been slung against them, but they maintained, well, they had no choice, obviously, because they were defending their country and their future. But I think that their voices are neglected, and the Syrian journalists' voices are neglected. Recently, there was a young woman injured in Idlib, and she's been a brave correspondent. She's a correspondent for RT, so of course, you know, Western media will say, ooh, she contributes to Russian media, but she's honest. And this is the thing, the whole Russophobic slanders against anything to do with Russia and Russian media is ridiculous, because if you look at the reporting, it's consistently, if you just look at the issue of Syria, it's consistently been based on facts on the ground and reality. And the same with the Syrian journalists that are largely overlooked by Western corporate media. So I feel it's important to recognize them as well as the leadership, because now again, if you think about looking back with hindsight, everything that the Syrian president has said about what was happening in Syria turns out to be true. But people are too afraid to say that because they don't want to be called, you know, some sort of term.
So Eva, I know that you just have a few more moments with us, but before you do head out, I want you to just talk in your perspective. I know you said you had limited knowledge on Julian's case, but I'm sure that you are familiar with it. What are your concerns for press freedoms for the future if Julian is extradited to the United States and tried here? And then before you do head out, I want to thank you so much for spending your evening with us and for taking the time to speak with us tonight, and then also let everybody know where they can find you and where they can find your work.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think the most basic point that people should obviously see is that if he was extradited, this just speaks about how there is no press freedom whatsoever, and this could happen to anybody. I mean, that should be obvious. If his case is so prominent and so, as much as it's not in the Western corporate media in a positive light as much as it should be, if this case is so clear, then it could happen to yourself, to myself, to anybody who writes something or who says something that's challenging the corporate narrative. And you know, it is happening in Ukraine all the time. Journalists are being imprisoned in Ukraine for absolutely no reason. And I feel like, although this case is now passed, one case that I took up was the issue of this journalist with RIA Novosti in Ukraine. He was the editor, and he was imprisoned from May 2018 to August last year for no reason whatsoever. The Ukrainian authorities simply said that they had evidence that he had committed state treason, and he's locked up. This kind of thing could happen anywhere. And I would note that if it happened in a country that is one of America's targets, Russia, North Korea, Iran, you know that there would be all this crocodile tear famed concern. But because it's happening in countries that are allies of the West, nobody cares. So it's happening now. It's happening to Assange. And if we don't fight this sort of repression and oppression, then it can happen to anybody. You know, I think that's the main thing is if you don't care about Assange and his issue, although, you know, we should care, but if you just think about yourself, if you're in any way political or active or vocal, it can happen to you as well. It happened to the Press TV journalist, and she's an American. She went to the States to visit her family, and she was locked up for like a week. And she's got an American citizenship, you know, American passport. So I think that people should, just like with any of these issues, you know, people think about Palestine, they think, oh, it's over there, or Syria, it's over there. We're all connected. We have to care about these issues. It can't be we living in these bubbles and thinking, oh, it's all fine, it's just happening there. You know, we have to be concerned about the rest of humanity. And
all right, Eva, do let everybody know where they can find you on social media and where they can find your work. I know you said it's published in a few places.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Eva K. Bartlett. Facebook, unfortunately, I'm still on there, Eva Kareen Bartlett. My blog, which I haven't morphed yet into a website, is ingaza.wordpress.com. And I do have a Patreon. I believe it's Eva K. Bartlett. Not sure about that.
Okay, we will link that information in our show notes for you guys. Eva Bartlett, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks.
All right. Great discussion there on some world affairs in Syria in particular, which has been something that we have discussed on this Vigil, specifically in the context of the OPCW leaks. Now, we have another guest joining us this evening. We are joined by Reese, and he is a producer on Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp. He lives in DC, where he started working in the realm of journalism with a focus on left-wing organizing and movement building. And he joins us now. So, Reese, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, everybody. No problem. Thank you.
So can you talk about, for us, maybe what led you to pursue your career in left-wing organizing? A big part of what we try to do is get people involved on the ground in activism, specifically to fight for issues related to free speech and free press, and for the freedom of whistleblowers and other political dissidents.
Yeah, so it's a varied story, really, because the first part of my awakening has a lot to do with what we're talking about tonight with Julian Assange. When I was way too young to read it, I read John Pilger's book, Hidden Agendas. And it's a book that goes through the history of US intervention in, well, not even the history really, because it only really does the 20th century, but of US intervention in the developing world, and, or, you know, the formerly colonized world. And in the book, he just goes through all of these horrific stories of things like the CIA giving these tyrants, these dictators, kill lists of communists in their countries who are, you know, getting in the way of our corporations, and those people died. And it's just I was way too young to be awoken to this stuff, because I didn't even know where Cambodia was. I was born in England. I was a young, stupid kid, and I was learning all of these horrific things about Western culture and our intelligence agencies, and the way that we have developed like this white supremacist world system that is built on the suffering of billions of people around the world. And so that I read all that, and it made me want to it made me want to be a war correspondent, ironically, which is funny because I just spoke before Eva Bartlett. That never happened. But I did go into university and I studied journalism. And when I was studying journalism, one of the first things I really realized was that journalism is a corporate industry. And that when you are trying to be a journalist, what you're really trying to be is a messenger for global capitalism, unless you're willing to just become let's say, a pariah, and a blogger now is what it would be.
Reese, you know what? It's funny you say that, because when I hear you say once you started, becoming involved in the field of journalism, you realized what it really was about firsthand through your experience. And I can tell you, I share that same experience, being at a state university studying journalism, which eventually led me to realize that I was going to be doing this independently. Because I noticed that you were a mouthpiece for the powerful and a mouthpiece for corporations.
Yeah,
I wasn't willing to do that.
Yeah, so I was at Appalachian State, a state university, and so we have the same experience there. And then I have this other experience of having a high school teacher who took me and two of my other, we were not the best kids, but he encouraged us to engage in environmental work. And what we were doing was making biodiesel at our school. And that was my first real experience with understanding that the way our society is built is going to kill us ultimately. It's not, sustainable is the term. And so those were I had those two experiences of being awoken to just the massive suffering that's caused by our industrial society, and also being awoken to the environmental devastation that society is also causing. So
you're playing like all of my songs there, Reese. When I was 12 and 13, I got like a copy of George Carlin's tapes, and I got a copy of Bill Hicks's work at the time, and I got a copy of Behold a Pale Horse, and then a bunch of other books that just kind of set me off Doors of Perception and Be or Not. It was just, very, I got introduced to way too much, way too young in terms of that. And I briefly lived in Boone. I lived on Rocky Creek Road outside of town a little bit, like right off of the Dock and Merle Highway.
Cool.
Yeah,
it's a very nice town, isn't it? It's
I got a tattoo there. As a matter of fact, I did.
I ended up in Asheville. I assume you've spent some time in Asheville as well.
As a matter of fact, I have.
Yeah.
Still have friends there to this day. Yeah.
Yeah, that is also a great city.
I agree. I do. So has your activism, does it work hand in glove with your gig at RT? Do you find that you have time to do both? Do you have any upcoming events, anything that you would like to promote?
So my official answer to that is that I'm not engaged in activism anymore. It's a professional conduct thing. I am not supposed to be organizing because of impartiality, even though I'm not actually in the news section of RT. I'm more in the entertainment section. But yes, I have the opportunity to boost the bandwidth of a lot of groups who are doing important work that I approve of. And I have the opportunity to go to these things and go as a journalist. Right now in DC, we have a group that's doing something called Shut Down DC. And it's very much based on environmental ideas. I'm a big fan of it because I'm a fan of the history of direct action. And back in 1972, the hippie movement shut down DC under the guise of under the slogan, if we can't shut down the war, shut down DC. And I just think it's funny that I don't think it's funny. I think it's horrific. That 1972 protest is not what got the US out of Vietnam, but it did cause a massive stir. and right now we're in this place where the people who control our society, they've managed to keep us in a 18 years in Afghanistan, 17 years in Iraq, and with no sight of ending it, no mass movement that has the power to shut it down. And so I'm happy to be organizing tangentially to an organization like Shutdown DC, because I really feel like the US we need to end our wars. And it's thanks to people like Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, and Edward Snowden that we have propaganda now. Because of them, we have inside information we have the videos of our soldiers committing war crimes. We have, we have the emails from powerful people, and from powerful people committing war crimes. And those things help us, or will help us, hopefully, if we can get together and, all take a stand which recognizes that all of humanity is on a massive, rock spaceship flying through, an infinitely large space. And we're all in this together. We're not going to get out of it. And the people who think that they are going to get out of it, they might buy themselves like 200 years or something. But like, ultimately, humanity has done all of its best work through collaboration. Now, that's a kind of dark statement, because a lot of humanity's, the pyramids were made by slaves, the kind of thing. But I think that now that we have this globalized structure in the world, I think maybe I really hope that we can create something better, because I mean, we face a lot of large problems, and we don't seem to have the will to fix them. But that's why direct action and organizing and everything is needed right now, because people have faced horrific crises before, and they've done something about it. Now we are divided, and the divisions aren't.
I was going to say, I'm sorry that in the middle of all of this, we're watching an election get rigged in real time. In the middle of everything you just discussed and the need for direct action, we're watching an election get rigged, like right in front of everybody's eyes. And people are doing nominally what they did in 2016, which was go, yeah. And the difference is Bernie Sanders had an app alongside the app from a company called Shadow Inc. Like, I can't believe it was called Shadow Inc. That's a real thing that happened. A company called Shadow Inc. got $75 million from DNC insiders to produce an app for the Iowa caucuses that didn't work. It didn't work the way that they thought it was gonna, and now they released poll results at 1.7%, showing CIA Pete with a nominal delegate lead, and then they did it at 62%, and then at 71%. They're like, wait a minute, we might have messed up on a percent or two. Hang on, we'll be back.
Hey,
And
Steve.
that's only because they were called out.
Steve,
Yeah.
I have to make a joke right now. I thought you didn't like talking about the political horse race.
It happened. It's happening in real time right now. And this brings us right to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, because he was there and they were there the entire way through. And when we got the DNC emails, when we got the Podesta emails, we got Vault 7, Vault 8, it gave us the clearest picture of how our politics work and how our government works and how our intelligence communities work. And again, most people went, yeah. Like, direct action, Reese, is what we need. And we need to do it in a nonviolent manner. And we need to do it in a way that will allow other people to come on board and be comfortable with what we're doing.
So I've been trying to build a coalition for our DC event, reaching out to a bunch of different groups. We actually just got endorsed by Veterans for Peace and Women Against Military Madness. So I want to say thank you to those two organizations for not sponsoring us, but supporting us in our actions and spreading the word about it. But I think one of the big points too, when I was going through trying to find all of the different anti-war groups that there was, like literally in the country, the majority of them shut down between 2008 and 2012. So there is a major deficit in the anti-war movement across the country right now. And it was in large part thanks to an anti-war candidate who got the Peace Prize and then invaded 7 countries. So I think rebuilding the anti-war movement as a larger civil rights movement for privacy, for free speech, for literally just getting the money back, like taking our power back from the government itself and having local and personal sovereignty be the thing that's placed before federal sovereignty. But ultimately, it starts with rebuilding all of these groups, because the activist community in the last decade has just gotten devastated by infiltrators, by people shutting groups down because they were DC insiders that ran them, and then their guy got in, so they didn't need to protest anymore. So I think getting a really large push into almost starting like the Yellow Vest US protests as a civil rights movement is really the direction that we need to get in. And what I'm hoping that we can do with the DC event is spark some action within people to take a little bit more initiative to change the world that we live in.
Yeah, a funny thing about movement building, momentum, and everything is that you never know when it's going to kick off, and that it's often something that you might not have expected, something you didn't see coming, that just gets people out into the streets. And I agree. I mean, I think that we do have a lot of people who are active now and who are furious, and they're all working on, separate issues, as has always been the case. But one would hope that, for instance, there's a large environmental movement. And the US military is one of the worst polluters on the planet. I actually think it's the worst. I just don't want to commit to that statement. But we have so people who are furious, and we have people feeling disempowered because, 2016, if you were paying attention, was stolen out in the open. If you were paying attention to the primary in 2016, Bernie had momentum, and then the media refused to even discuss him as a serious candidate. And the same thing is happening now, and he seemed to have been ready, which honestly, I was very, when everything with Iowa was coming out, when they released the 50%, I was quite depressed, I have to say, because I had kind of thought that Bernie was going to run away with Iowa, based on what I had been hearing. And then when I heard that he had made his own app, and that because he had made his own app, he had been able to call out the DNC, I was elated, and that's continued up until now. And so I learned that last night. I think that we're playing with chance, and we're always going to be playing with chance. And I think that history a lot of the time has turned on chance. And I just really hope that something works out for us. And the only way you can make sure of that is to be the only way you can affect that is to be in the streets and organizing, like you're saying, like you are, the protest will be here at the end of this month, correct? Here in DC?
Yep, it'll be February 24th through the 28th.
Are you getting permits?
No, we don't do parades.
Are you going to be where is the plan to be?
So we have a plan to march from the White House to the Department of Justice on Monday. Tuesday's a media engagement day, which we're still hammering out the plan for that. But roughly the plan is, outside of major media institutions, start a Who's Next campaign, essentially highlighting journalism pieces that could get people arrested for the Espionage Act. and put those like front and center in the faces of the mainstream media and say, hey, this article is going to land you in Belmarsh prison next. And then Wednesday, I believe we're going to Chelsea Manning's detention center, if I remember that properly. That's Wednesday or Thursday. And that's Thursday. Wednesday, we're doing like a basically just like a big vigil, right between the Supreme Court and Congress. And then Friday, we're doing another march from the White House to the Department of Justice. And then we're going to have speakers.
And as this is,
oh, I was just going to say, we're going to have speakers
in
different. We're going to have speakers in different little things, events set up throughout that time too. And the other hope, right, is that we have the public events, the 5 time slots in the 5 days that we publish, and then coordinating events through encrypted messaging behind the scenes, using a multitude of different encryption platforms to get essentially faceless direct action events going on, coordinated but decentralized between multiple different groups. So that's kind of the hope of what we can make DC if we can get enough people there, with public events and direct action events happening behind an encryption wall.
I'm sorry, Andrew, I did not mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to make note too that during that time while in DC, Steve and I will be in London covering this hearing for you guys. We'll be posting footage to Twitter, keeping you updated on social media. And then in the evening, of course, that is UK time, so it'll be afternoon for you guys. We will be having a live stream, and then also Tarika Dodd is going to be working with us on the ground while we're there, which is very exciting to have him work with us as well. And it is a unfortunate reason. And so is Gordon Dimmick, yes. So all of us will be collaborating, working together, making sure that there's a lot of footage and accurate coverage for you guys. So we will be in London during that time. It's going to be a busy week, and we will also be coordinating, of course, with our co-hosts back here in the US.
And just to give it a shout out real quick, we're still trying to raise about $1,000 more to help everybody with all the expenses that we have getting to 2 people to DC and 2 people to London for a week. So I'm sure that we can put that link into the chat for our GoFundMe, but if you could, and at least share the link out, if not donate what you can, because we're trying to be the American news source out there, because from what we understand, there's really not many other people going out there.
It's true. There's, as far as we know, we're the lone independent media presence that's going to have actual U.S. bodies on the ground there. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be at least an affiliate of one of the major networks, but all they're going to do is relate state propaganda and call it fact. And we would like to be able to present the actual, minutia of the proceedings, and we'll be able to interview people that are on the ground outside of Belmarsh, and we'll be able to sit down with Tariq, who I believe is hoping to be inside.
I think that he will. Well, we don't know, but Steve and I will not be able to make it inside the courtroom. We just won't be able to. We just can't do that, and that was never the intention. We'll be outside, but somebody who is working with us may be able to get inside. At this time, I'm so nervous to announce this, but I might as well because this footage will be put there. Quickly, with consideration of my career and what's going on, I'm a trained journalist. I actually do have training. Now, that does not mean that makes you a great journalist, but I do have that. It's specifically in video editing and shooting and all of that, and how to form stories and that sort of thing. Moving forward, oh my God, I'm nervous to say this. Moving forward with lots of consideration from people close to me whose opinions I value, and also just me knowing that I have to step up and take some initiative and get over the fears here, I have decided that I will also be starting my own journalism on my own, unrelated to Action for Assange. I'm still with Action for Assange. I'm still doing these vigils. I'm still doing all of that. But on top of this work, I'm going to be launching my own channel, and I'm going to be putting out my own work. It'll look different than this. It's going to be a much more professional look. I'm going to be talking about a wide variety of topics with a focus on Julian Assange and the intelligence community, press freedoms, free speech issues. But basically, I will be discussing all sorts of political issues. I'm a very political person. It interests me greatly. So that is something new. So watch out for that. I'm in the process right now of launching that and figuring out what it will look like. I will be putting some of my content from the extradition hearing on that on my own channel as well when that is launched. But I thought I would announce that to you guys tonight, because I will be putting my stuff there. And boy, I just had to say it because I have to do this. And it's important that I separate also, first and foremost, that I do not attach a political ideology to Action for Assange. That's been something we've been very firm about. And when I talk about some issues or do interviews, it's important that I'm going to have a certain perspective, and it's important that that perspective isn't the face of this movement, because we welcome people of various political backgrounds. So I have to make that distinction, and I hope you guys will support me and also subscribe to that channel when it's up, and I will keep you updated on that.
So Reese, if you could, what do you remember from 2016 and 2018 as far as like the election riggings and the closing of polling places go? Do you have any like memories of when they were doing the electioneering back then?
You said me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember most of it happening, of learning about the stuff afterwards, like the New York, when it turned out that they had purged 200,000 people from the rolls in New York. California had a similar incident, but a lot of that was only verified. Like, we heard the accounts on the day of voting. You would go on Twitter and you would see people retweeting a lot of accounts who were saying that they'd registered as Democrat, gone to the polls, and their registration hadn't or had been deleted. But the major way that Bernie was rat fucked, I believe is the term. So are we allowed to swear? Okay. The major way that happened was that was the media. Through media coverage, the way that the media consistently they measured the race by how many superdelegates were pledged. Even if those superdelegate states hadn't voted yet, they would say that they would say Hillary has X delegates, including superdelegates. Bernie only has this much, where those superdelegates, most of them wouldn't have even been in play at the time because their states hadn't even had their primary yet. Actually, my boss was covering this a lot. Lee Camp on Redacted Tonight had a lot of great coverage of what was happening. There's also somebody named Greg Palast. And Greg Palast actually uncovered one of the largest stories of the rigging, which was a program called Interstate Crosscheck. And Interstate Crosscheck just removed people from the rolls if they had similar names to other people. And so this really affected the Korean community because a lot of Korean immigrants have the surname Park. And so it would be like, oh, there's like a Luke Park in California and there's a Luke Park in Florida. I bet it's the same person. Let's just wipe them both off. And so, it's never simple. These people, the people whose interests are in maintaining this corporate status quo, they hire lawyers to like work out their smart plans and do their dirty work. They know that like your average person isn't going to take them to court, and so they can defame a couple people. And so, yeah, my memories mostly are just of Bernie either being ignored or being treated like a communist from an, with rhetoric from an era that's really gone. And honestly, the way that they treated Bernie probably is part of the reason why a lot of young people nowadays are getting over the Russophobia and are willing to look right past all of this rhetoric that's being thrown around today about if you are talking about rigging, then you're actually just a Russian bot. If you are saying that like Hillary Clinton wasn't popular, then you were actually just influenced by Russian bots, and that wouldn't be your real opinion if you did your research. And if you do your research, then you do discover that like there's a lot of reasons to dislike Hillary Clinton. But the media narrative was just very strong, and in my opinion, the amount of work they put into discrediting Bernie in 2016 was also kind of an unveiling of their power structure and how because I read a story last week that was about how and it was in Reuters published this story, and it was about how the British Crown had been paying Reuters throughout the 20th century to slander the Bolsheviks, to slander the Russian Soviet government. And Reuters had to publish it because it came out, and if they weren't the ones that published it, it would look like a cover-up. But then, I think a lot of people have heard of Project Mockingbird, for instance, which is the CIA infiltrated the news media, and they did it for a long time, and they did it all to discredit left-wing voices. And this lasted for decades, and I think that what happened in 2016 was they felt like they'd had a good run. They'd manipulated people against democratic thought, believing in that we could self-govern, and Bernie was a real threat to them, and so they took off their mask and they just became attack dogs rather than subtle snipers. And so I think there's an element where the things that you've asked me to remember were good for us. The way that they took off their masks and showed the monster behind the masks woke a lot of people up and made a lot of people realize you can't trust the mainstream media. The mainstream media is in the pockets of big oil, of the big banks, of any billionaire willing to pay, really. And now a lot more people know that, and a lot of people are trying to start their own independent media. A lot of people are looking for independent media, and I think it's in the long run it's going to help us all out. But yeah, what I remember of the rigging was mostly post-fact, was learning about the lawsuits that came down against different Democratic parties in different states that turned out that they had purged voters. There's also the fact that the American electoral system is, I think it's the most compromised electoral system in the developed world. Our voting machines are like children's toys. They're you can hack our voting machines easily. So say specialists, so say the experts, right? And so when people try to talk about how 2016 was the Russian election, they're completely ignoring the fact that we never had a democracy anyway. And even for the pedants who want to say, actually, we live in a republic, we never had a system designed to represent the American people. We always had a system that was designed to represent the oligarchs. and the facade is coming down. And
I would go as far as to say that even the propaganda surrounding slavery is incredible, because if you actually read the 13th Amendment, it still allows for slavery. And then we have this crazy war on drugs that puts millions and millions of people in jail for nonviolent offenses. And then you have a billionaire like Bloomberg come out and hire prison labor to do his political phone calls. So
And
there's
then
this,
buy his way into the debate.
so there's this
They
whole
literally suspended their own rules to allow Mike Bloomberg to buy his way into the debate, but they left out Tulsi.
yep, I mean they've given up. They've given up on the facade.
Yeah, the veneer. I don't even know if there was really ever a veneer completely there, but people couldn't communicate in a quick enough and efficient enough way to show that there was no veneer to begin with, because that's more or less growing up from the age of like 12 or 13 when 9/11 happened till now. I've just realized every structure and every system that has been built around us was literally designed to trick us into thinking we've had all of these rights and responsibilities in a democratic society and represented by people that represent us. And I've never seen an act of accountability in my lifetime. The closest thing was Brenda Snipes stepping down after the last election with Tim Canova. But even then, just another sock puppet got put up in her place to be the Broward County Board of Elections supervisor. So what I'm really hoping, and at this stage in the game, is that Sanders will actually do something to demand accountability and get people predisposed to demanding accountability. Because I think that's the only silver lining that we can get from this is if someone who's leading the charge will actually lead a charge.
I'm gonna pull something up on the share screen here real quick, just to let you know where we're at in terms of how rigged this is getting in real time. Can everybody see that? This is 538 coming out way ahead of the game, doing their estimated pledge delegate count. What this says is, A, they don't believe Tulsi Gabbard exists. They don't believe Andrew Yang exists. Andrew Yang already won delegates. They've got Biden at 1,033 delegates. Biden, I don't believe, will make it past South Carolina. He may make it to Super Tuesday, maybe not, but I don't think he's long for this presidential race, which is, a godsend, because the man is slowly declining before our very eyes. But even if he didn't win a delegate after the frozen vote count,
Okay, real quick, everybody in the chat, please let us know how shocked you are right now that Steve is actually talking about these candidates.
I'm talking about this because it relates to the need for WikiLeaks, and it relates to the need for whistleblowers.
Steve, I'm messing with you. It's just because your claim to fame with me is the horse, the political horse race.
So it drives me nuts, but I want to show you guys how it's being rigged in real time. That's outside of the horse race and into the realm of we don't have a government that has intelligence agencies. We have intelligence agencies that have governments. If Biden doesn't win a single delegate at the frozen vote count right now, he's got 300 and something, like 305, 306. The 727 delegates for the rest of the entire election to split up between, I'm guessing, the candidates on the screen and maybe Tom Steyer. And Bernie would have to get more than 400 of those 700 delegates in order to make his 1900 threshold and go in with a contested convention. This was never about a let's have a presidential election. It was about let's field as many candidates as humanly possible, so that we have to have a contested convention so that we can make sure the super delegates get to vote on the second round of balloting.
And they haven't been subtle about that.
There's part of me that laughs in a dark way about what's happening in Iowa. And then there's the other part of me that's literally seeing our democracy just get ripped down in real time so that way they can inject whatever story they want into the media. So if you could, Reese, could you talk a little bit about what makes RT different than mainstream sources?
Well, RT in its own way is a mainstream source, though, right? It's a counter narrative. It is it's state-funded media, but so RT is English language Russian state television. It's mostly English language, and the reason it exists is because Russians were sick of hearing propaganda about Russia. They were sick of the attacks on the Russian state, and they wanted a response. And their response is this state media that is critical of the US. And so it's got a really important place in my heart because you're not going to get a large, well-funded media operation covering American war crimes in a realistic way without RT. Because
let's be honest, no other corporate, because RT is not an independent outlet, like you said. It is funded by the Russian government, but there is no other like corporate media or like state-run television that I could think of right now that is in English that would cover Action for Assange and would have Christy and Andrew on the show. So that's something that says a lot about you guys.
There's Telesur.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's why I said I can't say for sure. Telesur, yes. See, this is why I shouldn't name any names here, but I want to just credit RT for being willing to talk about these issues consistently. Yeah.
I work with some people who do great work and get to cover. The other week when it came out that the Iranian intelligence had released that they had taken on an airplane with American officials on it.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I have to stop you one more time. I'm so sorry. And then I'll let you go on and I won't cut you off again. Also, I want to include Sputnik in that because I was just on actually Lee Stranahan and he allowed us to, he's very, very supportive of us. Like, I'm so happy and grateful for how supportive all of them at Fault Lines are. So they are another outlet who has given us a platform and supported our efforts. Why don't you go ahead? I just wanted to make sure I corrected that.
So Fault Lines, Sputnik is just down the road from us, and I'm a big fan of Loud and Clear and By Any Means Necessary. And yeah, I like. Well, I don't watch Fault Lines too often; it's kind of early for me. But yeah, Sputnik. Honestly, Sputnik's amazing. They had an organizer I know for the longest time named Eugene Purrier, and he is a passionate soul, but also an intellectual, and he's an intellectual on like the carceral state, the prison industrial complex, and you're not going to get CNN if they're going to have somebody come on to talk about the carceral state. You're going to get somebody next to them who's like an actual hedge fund manager whose big money comes from the carceral state, and they're going to give the hedge fund manager more time. So yeah, no, I agree with that. Sputnik as well, another Russian state-funded outlet, and those people come by our offices, and I like them a lot as well. But yeah, Loud and Clear for me is actually one of the most credible and reliable news sources that's in the media. They really do a great job, and they, John Kiriakou, he is a hero. I mean, we're talking about intelligence agents. This is the guy who let us know that we were torturing people and did jail time for it. And also like the founder of Answer Coalition, which is America's like most reliable anti-war movement. They are out all the time. If America's doing some bullshit, which is just about like, at least quarterly, yeah, we're always pulling something around the world, and answers are in the street for that. Because that's another thing about American liberals. I think their hearts are in the right place a lot of the times, but they don't pay attention. When America starts trying to degrade another nation and obviously pushing for war with that nation, they're not reliably going to be on our side. But groups like Answer Coalition, who are very left wing, are always going to be out there. Yeah.
Answer Coalition does some great work as well.
Yeah.
We're actually hoping too to get them involved in the DC protests. I think Ian Schlackman, he's one of the good friends of the show, is actually going to meet with them in a couple days to talk with them about potentially endorsing and promoting our events too.
I actually didn't know that name, but I know the name. I didn't know who he was. He communicates with me on Redacted Tonight all the time. He's like, I think he's very Twitter friendly.
Yes,
yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
Ian's a great guy. He was originally running for the Green Party presidential nomination. And because the Green Party kind of went the route of the 2016 DNC with their nomination process, he wound up leaving the party and dropping out of the race. But his activism has only become more intense since. And he is, he's a wonderful human being. I'm very supportive of his efforts.
Next time I interact with him, I'll tell him.
Yeah, he's been on our vigils here and has been very supportive of Julian Assange, outwardly supportive of him. And he was on one of our very first vigils, and we had about like 6 guests that night, and it was up to Steve and I to kind of juggle them all, and we managed. It was a pretty interesting vigil, but yeah, he's been supportive of us from day one.
Good.
So while we're still on the topic of presidential candidates, I want to give 3 people a shout out that are still running. Adam Kokesh of the Libertarian Party, Dario Hunter of the Green Party, and Joe Kishore of I think it's the Socialist Equality Party. All of them amazing friends of the show. All of them would make spectacular presidents. But the most important thing is all of them are pushing for an actual nonviolent revolution in this country, to actually get the changes we need, because the electoral system and one Congress critter at a time just hasn't cut it for the last decade trying to beat this. So those people are awesome. If you're looking for someone outside of the 2-party system because of how fucked it is to support, they all have great messages.
Yes. Yes, that's true. We usually don't talk about the election stuff, but honestly, this is really serious. And I feel like it's not completely being ignored, but by the corporate media, but it's just being watered down a lot. I want to also credit the MCSC network for excellent coverage of the Iowa caucuses. I mean, I was watching it as much as I could. I was having to work on some of my own stuff, but I mean, excellent coverage from Pasta and Fiorella and everybody that they had on. They did really, really good and actually broke some very important news related to the election. Do check them out. I was really, really impressed by what I saw. It was very good.
Hands down, had the best election.
The Convo Couch, yes.
Coverage.
And also too, they want to cover this election season, of course, and I believe they have a GoFundMe. So do follow them on Twitter at the Convo Couch, I believe is their Twitter handle. Follow them, contribute to their GoFundMe, because they are doing a really, really good job reporting on the candidates. And they've also made an effort to question all of the candidates about their perspective and their stance on Julian Assange, which is really important. But they do a really good job.
I also have good things to say about the organization Status Quo. Status Quo has been, they're on the ground, which is it's important. The most good journalism is boring, and Like, I'm not saying that what they do is boring. I'm just saying that reliable, just following a beat is it's one of the more important ways that you can be a journalist, is just to keep an eye on people who aren't necessarily doing anything bad, but they will if nobody's paying attention to them. That's actually a lesson that's been learned from the death of local journalism in the US, is that now a lot of state and local legislatures are just wiling out and just like doing whatever they want, because there isn't a local journalism holding them to account and telling their communities when they're making anti-scientific laws, anti-woman laws, anti-LGBT laws. And so I didn't know that you all were creating a media effort, a journalistic media effort. And I think that is something that is just very important right now, is to be creating media that's not corporatized.
One of the goals for setting the Vigil up, and me specifically pulling Steven and Taylor in, well, Taylor and I founded it together, but pulling Steven and encouraging Taylor to get started making her own shows, is to create a new era of independent journalism, like a post-partisan era, because even a lot of the independent journalists nowadays still have some kind of partisan slant to them. Not that that's an inherently bad thing. But so yeah, we actually want to move into doing much more regular content, like news-based content, on the ground reporting journalism. So that's one of the goals, as Action for Assange grows and as the Vigil grows, is to start additional shows with additional programming. And we actually have we've been in talks with different countries about starting their own Action for Assange vigils through our channel. So hopefully over time, as this grows more and more, we'll actually have other nations live streaming through this as well, kind of creating an international media source. So that's really one of the goals here behind the scenes, is to create an actual united independent front for the media.
And a decentralized but communicative organization of Action for Assange chapters, which we have now in North Carolina. That's
Boone
Denver as well has
Argentina.
one too.
We have New Zealand. We are working on Australia. Right now, it's been very difficult to keep up with those during these few weeks, because we are preparing a lot for, obviously, a very big extradition hearing and some protests and peaceful demonstrations in DC. We have a lot going on right now, but we do have some other chapters, and we encourage everybody to check those out. Once those kind of start to become their own, we hope to see them kind of run in a direction that they'd like to, but then also we'll be promoting those accounts as well, to share information that is factual on Julian and his case.
And Taylor, what
and Andrew will be helping me, because I'm going to need, Andrew's so good at finding content, and just really, really good. I mean, when we first met, it was one of the most interesting conversations I had, was with Andrew, honestly. So he will be helping me too, also with video content and coming up with news stories and providing different perspectives on things. So he'll be very much a part of my work that I do on my own, in addition to Action for Assange. And what are you titling your effort, Taylor? I don't know yet. This is the very early stages. I'm just going to go by my name. That's what it will be. I'm still working with others to get it launched, but I thought I would mention it tonight because we were talking about the hearing that we'll be going to, and I will be putting some of that footage on that channel. But I hope to have that up for everybody to subscribe to very soon. And do you guys know who Ford Fisher is? You guys know news?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he just got and just archive and wealth of footage up. Yeah, he's man. I can't say enough nice things about that guy and what he does.
Yeah, he's very cool too, isn't he? Taylor, you might be able to collaborate with him, especially at the beginning.
Yes, I intend on, well, yeah, I would like to do some of that for sure. So anybody that I align with as far as well, not even politically, I'm very much open to speaking with people with different viewpoints, and I think that's important, but very much looking forward to working with others as well and focus on other issues too and other things that I care about. So I know that we had some news topics that we wanted to get to.
Actually, if I could for a second, I want to ask.
Sure.
Because with the Iowa caucus and everything that's gone down that way, what are some ways do you think, Reese, that we could actually get acts of accountability for what's going on in Iowa right now? Not necessarily rolling heads, so to speak, but
Fuck. Oh, that's all right. Lawsuits. And that requires resources. I have to assume Bernie's going to sue. Joe Biden's asked for it. No, I say lawsuits because it's not rolling heads. It's shutting down buildings. It's and it's not just Iowa. The Iowa Democratic Party obviously felt a lot of pressure from above to make sure that Bernie did not come out of that thing with a clear victory.
And I think the biggest piece of propaganda too coming out of Iowa is that Pete Buttigieg got the percentage that he did. Like, no one gives a fuck about that guy. He's literally like a cookie cutter CIA tool that they just ran through MSNBC for a year and a half now.
But they ran him through MSNBC for a year and a half. I mean, it's not Americans. People are not very inquisitive all the time. A lot of people spend their whole lives like working, looking after kids, sleeping, any social time they can get. Being informed is a whole job. And Pete Buttigieg just has so there's a narrative in the US, right, that you've got to be able to attract the whole country, which is really not smart politically because you only need 50%. but people who don't think very much are told, like, look, Pete Buttigieg, he has the identity stuff. He's got the military stuff. He he's fine. He's like this year's Barack Obama. When the Democrats landed on Barack Obama, I don't think they were fully aware that they had a candidate who could win America, do whatever he wanted, which is the corporate agenda, and then still be loved by most of the country. Now, it doesn't matter that he killed kids, and somebody like Pete Buttigieg has those same elements. So I can believe that he did well. Also, it's Iowa.
In the Daily Beast, Reese, for suggesting that that CIA Pete might have CIA ties. Now he they basically walked in and McKinsey'd Iowa. You know what I mean? Like the McKinsey and Company, the destabilization. Yeah. They did. I think Ben Norton was the one who called them Pete Guaido.
Yep.
They waltzed right in and were like, okay, well, here's your winner at 1.7%. He's got it. And that's about as classic a maneuver as you would expect our government to use the CIA to pull in Latin America. We have a precedent for this, and it's starting to happen in our own domestic elections. I think that largely we're a banana republic with suburbs.
Do you think CIA Pete's going to try to call for a military intervention and then none of them are going to show up because he convinced Mike Pence that he had him on his side?
Mike Pence was just meeting with Juan Guaido. There's no reason he wouldn't sit down with. Oh no, he probably wouldn't sit down with Pete Guaido, not without like an electroshock therapy conversion kit handy.
I mean, maybe he's going to come into
That
it.
is so awesome, Steve. I was waiting for a good joke from you on that because I felt it coming. I do not think he's going to sit down with Pete Buttigieg. I'm sorry, that's just so funny to me.
I believe
That's
they have
crazy
some-
shit that you said about having lunch with women.
Right? So
Yeah,
yeah, like I don't know how he does that. I don't know if he's got to like phone a friend who comes in like as an intermediary.
He has to take an altar boy with him if he's going to dinner with a man.
It's his wife. He can't go to dinner with women, right? And so
Yeah. Not without mother.
He's still going to be jealous of a man who is sexually viable for her husband.
Does that mean he has to bring mother when he goes to dinner with Pete Buttigieg?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
I believe they have actually sat down together. I mean, Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana, and Pete Buttigieg was a mayor. And I have actually heard that they, Pete Buttigieg did some political maneuvers around the AIDS crisis, I think.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that aspect, that they may have actually previously met with one another.
So this, I'm not responsible for this. I'd already moved out, but when Mike Pence was elected to Congress, he was elected from my hometown's district in Indiana. He was do you guys know this? He was a talk radio host. That's awesome. How he got elected to the House of Representatives. He did talk radio, and he advertised himself as Rush Limbaugh on decaf. That was Mike Pence. That's how he got famous enough to get elected in central Indiana to the House of Representatives. And look how he parlayed that. He's helping Marco Rubio and the CIA organize a coup in Venezuela that is going so poorly.
He was never a businessman.
I mean, I'm not sure what he did before the talk radio. I don't know.
Is there a way we can get those old talk radio tapes and then do
I guarantee there's a way to do it. I
think we should do that.
There's an archive somewhere.
Although he was probably really boring.
He was probably really boring and really Christy.
Yeah.
I couldn't picture it any worse than Cenk Uyghur's stuff from his Republican times, though.
I know. Well, Cenk was puffed up with the law degree. Mike Pence probably has like an MBA or something. I don't know for certain.
So regarding Buttigieg, though, I think that a lot of the fear mongering right now might turn out to be overblown, because Buttigieg doesn't really have a run on the presidency. He doesn't really have a run on 1900 electoral delegates. And so it's almost like a desperate maneuver to stop Bernie from winning Iowa that they threw Buttigieg there. And Buttigieg spent a lot of money there. He traveled around the state. He was there for a long time. He didn't have to be in the impeachment inquiries in the Senate. And so I think that, like, in the long run, Buttigieg he's not gonna be the candidate. Biden, it sounds like his brain is gonna fall out of his ears before long. His eye's gonna burst again, and he's gonna have to go into like care. And I mean, he'll be done. Warren has just destroyed a lot of her credibility with her attack on Bernie, with her entire history of just embellishing things.
Well, yeah, her credibility is built on paper, and it's very, very thin paper. She's got sound bites, but when you explore her career, her background, and the votes she's made and the money she's taken, she's consistently been a center-right to far-right politician.
Yeah, and if you're going to believe that she's the candidate of, I have a plan, then you have to have conservative principles, because if you look at her plans, they're not social democracy. They are They're Obama. They're Obama light, but they're Obama.
Personally, I believe the system is rigged to the point that we would be much better off organizing, the multiple kinds of general strikes and withholding our labor, and like working on community gardens and sustainability. And but
yeah,
in terms of Elizabeth Warren, I mean, she's almost a tragic figure. Like, if she hadn't have fucked over all of the people that she is claimed to represent and or be, if she didn't have that history, she would be a tragic figure.
No, I absolutely agree. America's problems are not going to be solved electorally. I am a Bernie fan. Because there's so much suffering in this country right now, and I think that a Bernie presidency could alleviate pain. But yeah, ultimately, you're not going to solve the problems we face by voting. I absolutely agree. I think community gardens, I think people do need to go back to the land. I think that, I believe in democracy. I think that people need to create their own legislatures, do our own, the French Commune. I think that they were onto something. But
so
right
now, just real quick, I'm sorry, I see that we have 75 people watching, so make sure you guys like this video if you have not already. If you are new tonight and you have not subscribed to our channel, make sure you do hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. We go live every Wednesday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I think we'll be producing some more content actually, and we'll have more to say about that in the coming weeks. But again, do subscribe to our channel if you have not already, and then also double check that you're subscribed, because YouTube has a way of unsubscribing people if they don't necessarily like the content that's being produced by the channel. So thank you, and if you're new here, thanks for joining us. We seem to have a lot more viewers tonight,
So do we want to transition into talking about Niels Melzer's piece? How much time do you have tonight with us, Reese?
I didn't plan on staying much past 11, so I will probably head out soon.
Do you want to give us some final thoughts, and you can have 5 minutes to talk about whatever it is most important to you and where people can find you?
I'm about to get really weird, guys. No,
that's fine.
I'm for that, Reese. You go ahead and get weird. We got
No, I'll tell
5 minutes. Let's get weird.
No, if I were to get weird, the thing I would say is I think my half joking, most strongly held political belief is that we could really solve a lot of problems if every new Congress, they all just got locked in the Capitol building and took acid together, and just all of them, and they couldn't leave. We give them water and colorful paint. We give them paint or something, and that's how they introduce themselves to each other. And I think that it would be and we film it, obviously, and that's a strongly held political belief of mine that isn't likely. But if we're gonna go for the stars, no. So I work on the TV show Redacted Tonight. I'm a producer. I think that we are the most radical political comedy TV show that there is. Lee Camp is entertainingly enraged all the time, and obviously it's appropriate for the problems we face. It's nice to try and fall back into some kind of mocking and and try and be jovial about some of the problems we face. But really, the corporate, the oligarchy we live under, the military-industrial complex, the destruction of the planet that happens for corporate ends, the systemic racism that is experienced by so many Americans, the global racism that the white supremacist system puts on billions of people. There are children in Africa working in mineral mines so that we can have cell phones. Like all of this stuff we should absolutely be enraged about. And that's why I like the show that I work on, because it's because we express that rage, and we cover the stories that don't get covered, that prove that you should be enraged. And I think more people should watch our show. I think that you'll enjoy it if you do. The show is Redacted Tonight. Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp. You can catch our stuff at youtube.com/Lee Camp. I produce and I also run our social media. So if you ever want to say hi to me, interact with the Redacted Tonight Twitter. Sometimes you can interact with the Lee Camp Twitter, and I'll be over there as well. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. I think that there's a lot of benefit in being part of a community that is open to talking about the world as it really is, rather than hiding behind platitudes and false hope. Also, I think that mass mobilization is one of the most important things you can do. And you should all be part of something in your community. Anything. Just go out and be part of something in your community. Food Not Bombs. Feed homeless people. Or people who need food. Take part in... Nothing is perfect, but Extinction Rebellion are doing great work. I am a strong believer that if we don't change the way our society is built, then we're going to go into something called eco-apartheid, which is where only the rich survive. And I'm not actually willing to let that happen without a fight. Extinction Rebellion, the yellow vests in France are to be looked up to. We don't have the same model here in the US. The reason that they have yellow vests in France is because it's actually a law where French people who drive have to have a yellow vest just in case they break down. So it doesn't apply in the same way in the United States. You never want your revolution to have anything that poor people can't do. And so we don't need to be yellow vest America, because poor Americans don't need to be buying a yellow vest. They don't have time for that shit. We need our own thing, but we do need something.
I couldn't agree with you more. Before you run, by the way, our tech guy Josh, who we are so very happy to have with us, he's a fan, Reese, and I have a show as well called Slow News Day here on YouTube. I would love to get you on a show one of these days. I think that we have a lot in common, sir, and I think we'd have a decent conversation.
So I think you're active on Twitter, correct?
I am, yes.
I think I've seen, yeah, I will, am I following you from Redacted? Do you know that?
I maybe.
Sure.
I think I know I follow Redacted, and I will follow you personally, and we can connect.
Great. That sounds very interesting. I love to talk about important things. Great. Well, yeah, thank you, everybody. And solidarity with journalists around the world and Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. Oh, fuck. This is the last one. A new website's just gone up for Chelsea Manning. Everybody should be sending her letters and just thanking her for everything she's doing. And if you can, donate to her $200,000 fucking fund right now. They're charging her like $1,000 a day, I believe, for being a good person.
Could we try to find a way behind the scenes to coordinate a big push for fundraising to try to get her $1,000 a day raised?
I mean, yeah, that is definitely something to discuss, because you also need to reach out to me about February and what I can do to boost that, because we can talk to DC groups. I live here. I'm looking for the name of the Chelsea Manning website. I believe it's just releasechelsea.com.
There's on Twitter, it's Save Chelsea, and they've got all of that info. It's at Save Chelsea.
So the website is releasechelsea.com though.
Yeah.
And so it's a new website because there was the Chelsea XY as well. But she deserves all of the support that we can give her because she's also a badass person. Chelsea, I haven't spoken to her, but I've been at the same protest as her a bunch here in DC, and she does. She's out in the streets despite all of the pain that the U.S. state has put her through for exposing war crimes, fucking war crimes. We're killing people every day, and not enough people are saying it like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're being a little bit too soft on these issues, especially, and not really so much independent media, but corporate media for sure. And it's important to talk about this in a very frank way, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people feel, because that's the only way we're going to be able to initiate some real change. So thank you so much for coming on. It was an excellent discussion. Let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
I mean, my social media is really stupid. Like, very dumb. But
okay, you can put it into whatever social media you would like them to follow.
Redacted Tonight. Yeah.
Okay.
And send me your Patreon, Taylor. And,
okay.
I'll speak to you all. And yeah, Andrew, I'll speak to you soon, correct?
Yes, we'll be in touch.
Yeah,
we'll be
absolutely.
in touch. Thank you.
And I don't know the article, the Mills article. Otherwise, I would be interested in chatting about it.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, you're of course welcome to stick with us. Guys, you're probably wondering where Christy is. Unfortunately, she is dealing with some tech issues. Her internet is cutting in and out, and she is working to try to jump back on the stream. Unfortunately, before our show, where we check our audio and our stream, she was having some trouble. So hopefully she'll be able to get back on here. But for some reason, I don't know if it's the weather, but she is having some tech issues, as that happens sometimes. Unfortunately, we cut out earlier tonight, but we did continue to record the stream. So we do want to head over to our news section of the evening. And first, we want to get to an interview that was done with the UN Special Rapporteur. Thank you for joining us so much.
We'll have a good one.
Thank you. All right, everyone. So we will be talking about the interview with the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer. And I believe that one of my co-hosts will be pulling this up, or Josh will be, if Josh is with us. I know he had tech issues like Christy, so maybe he'll be able to pull this up for us. I don't think that I had a chance to talk to you guys about the event that I went to. I did do an interview with Graham Elwood on his channel right after the event, and I spoke about what went on during that time. But just to talk to you guys about it, it was really cool to see 4 attorneys speak about this case and have legal experts talk about it. I actually learned quite a bit. Again, I talk about it in that interview, which I'm sure is on his channel. But what I thought was really intriguing was the fact that 3 of the attorneys up there strongly felt, or just about all of them, I believe, strongly felt that the espionage charges against Julian Assange actually weakened the United States' ability to extradite him to the U.S. I also talk about this to a lesser extent in my interview with Lee Stranahan on fault lines. You could also check that out. I'll link it in the chat. But there are other events that are being held. February 15th, there is going to be one held in New York, Queens, New York, actually. Max Blumenthal will be speaking there. I don't know for sure. I think I may also be attending that one. I'm going to try. We will see, but I'm not 100% certain if that is possible. Are we able to pull that article up yet? The Nils Melzer article?
I think we are grabbing it right now.
We're grabbing it right now. But guys, the Courage Foundation, I just wanted to shout out to them. Wonderful organization. follow that organization on Twitter at Courage Found. They were the ones that held these events, or holding these events. So do follow them and do attend them if you can, and you can find more information, I believe, on their Twitter account. And
So
then I'm going to take this over.
I feel like this interview should be, you know, read from podiums in public places and shouted from street corners, and I feel like it should be taught in schools. This is one of this should be one of the things that wakes people who aren't paying attention up. It's an incredible interview. It's very lengthy. I don't think we're going to try and go through all of it in one sitting, because we'd be here for a couple of hours. But the opening question sets the tone for the entire interview, and it is such an interesting walk. The question that you guys are looking at right now: why is the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture interested in Julian Assange? And he says, well, somebody asked me that question. His answer, the case falls into my mandate in 3 different ways. First, Assange published proof of systematic torture. But instead of those responsible for the torture, it is Assange who is being persecuted. Second, he himself has been ill-treated to the point that he is now exhibiting symptoms of psychological torture. And third, he is about to be extradited to a country that holds people like him in prison conditions that Amnesty International has described as torture. In summary, Julian Assange uncovered torture, has been tortured himself, and could be tortured to death in the United States. And a case like that isn't supposed to be a part of my area of responsibility. Beyond that, this is a case of symbolic importance and affects every citizen in a democratic country. I'm gonna kick it back to the panel to get some reactions from my co-hosts there.
Yeah, so I just briefly here, and then I'll let, Andrew left. He'll be back though. Remember, guys, the British government, or whoever is responsible for responding to this report of torture, has failed to do so. And they just have failed to. They are obligated to address this issue. And remember that, unfortunately, we do not know how this torture is going to impact Assange in the long run. It'll likely impact him for the rest of his life, at least psychologically and probably physically as well. Before the short term, we know it has absolutely done so, but there isn't a lot of, I think, information available on how his situation impacts a person, because I think it's something that's so rare. So keep that in mind too when we're talking about the compassion part of this case. Again, we always try to make this about the larger issue at hand and not idolizing Julian Assange. I don't think he would want that, and that's not what we're trying to do. But this torture aspect is really, really serious, because the United States and other governmental bodies have been assisting in this happening, and they've done nothing to solve it.
And I've seen a couple of comments in the chat about why is Chelsea in jail and being fined. And the long and short of it is, she has a wonderful statement about why she refuses to participate in the grand jury process. We've gone through that statement before on the Vigils, but it is codified into U.S. law that if the judge in her particular case thinks that more time and more fines will break her, he is legally obligated to keep her behind bars until she breaks. If her legal team can make a case that won't fall on deaf ears to fucking kangaroos, that no, look, we have shown you over and over and over she is not going to break for you, then they have to let her out. But that's the way the law is constructed and written. It's beyond draconian, and it makes me incredibly angry. That's our country, and that's how we roll.
And I believe too, and I'm willing to be wrong on this, that this is one of the first times in American history that an individual, a flesh and blood person, has been fined in such a manner. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is one of the first instances of it in the history of our country that someone is fined so heavily for such a long period of time that isn't a corporation.
That's a really interesting point.
That's
I'm not
insane.
sure about that.
And we said on her birthday vigil that Chelsea spent 77% of her adult life incarcerated for being a whistleblower and refusing to participate in the grand jury process.
And over 10% of that, she was in solitary confinement. I actually think it was a
13.
year and a few months that she was locked away in solitary confinement.
I'm gonna go back to this interview, because it's so good and we need to cover it more. The interviewer asked, "Why didn't you take up the case much earlier?" And this has been circulating around on social media. It's again something that people need to get exposure to. If you have people in your life that aren't involved, please show them this interview. Imagine a dark room. Suddenly, someone shines a light on the elephant in the room, on war criminals, on corruption. Assange is the man with the spotlight. The governments are briefly in shock, but then they turn the spotlight around with accusations of rape. It is a classic maneuver when it comes to manipulating public opinion. The elephant once again disappears into the darkness behind the spotlight, and Assange becomes the focus of the attention instead. And we start talking about whether Assange is skateboarding in the embassy or whether he's feeding his cat correctly. Suddenly, we all know he's a rapist, a hacker, a spy, and a narcissist, but the abuses and war crimes he uncovered fade into the darkness. I, Melzer says, also lost my focus despite my professional experience, which should have led me to be more vigilant. Y'all, that's a hell of a paragraph.
And that sums up the power of the American propaganda empire and the Mockingbird media. Because all that is just repeating things uncritically. As soon as you scratch the surface of the rape charges, the whole thing completely falls apart. Down to the point that they didn't even have DNA on the condoms from Julian or the girl that it was supposedly used on. So him describing it that way is literally the situation that I think most people in the country are in. There's always yeah, I support Julian, but. And this part's literally just Niels Melzer going over what his I support Julian, but used to be. So I think him personalizing his story in this way is extremely powerful.
Yeah, and I thought it was really surprising to see that he gets like 15 new torture cases around the world a day. I mean, he has so much that he has to, or not torture case. Well, yeah, he gets 15 new cases a day at his desk, which is pretty. That's so much work to have to deal with, and an incredible amount of pressure. So hopefully, we'll be able to see him in London and have the opportunity to speak with him, or at least Tariq may be able to, because that would be really important and very educating, I guess, if that's the right word to use.
So Melzer walks the interviewer through his experience and how he came from being skeptical about Julian Assange, just assuming that there naturally had to be something, wrong with his character, that he was a nefarious individual, into, as Andrew said, scratching the surface of the investigation. It's a, I guess, the narrative device, kind of, in a way, where you take the reader or the listener on your journey in order to get them to experience it in a more personal way. And I think it's one of those things that, if applied in day-to-day life, you could go a long way towards convincing a lot of people to open their eyes to the reality of the situation.
Right. Yes. I'm sorry. I was going to say something and then I just decided not to.
Could we keep going though? Can we take it back to the article for the next couple parts?
Yeah. Give me
'Cause
just a minute to pull it up.
Yeah.
Here we go.
And we have reached out to his office, by the way, too, to try to ask him to come on the vigils and things like that. We did. I did send them an email.
So he sets up his story about, I realized I was skeptical. His lawyers finally got me to take a look at some documents, and then it quickly became clear to me that something was wrong, that there was a contradiction that made no sense to me with my extensive legal experience. Why would a person be subject to 9 years of a preliminary investigation for rape without charges having ever been filed? And he said, the interviewer, is that unusual? Which is a ridiculous question, by the way. Like, unless you're trying to spoon feed the storyteller, which in this case it works absolutely perfectly. He says, I've never seen a comparable case. Anyone can trigger a preliminary investigation against anyone else by simply going to the police and accusing the other person of a crime. The Swedish authorities, though, were never interested in testimony from Assange. They intentionally left him in limbo. Just imagine being accused of rape for 9.5 years by an entire state apparatus and by the media without ever being given a chance to defend yourself because no charges had been filed. This is the reality of the situation, is what's so maddening about running into people who only know the smears and only repeat the smears, because you have to go back through 9.5 years of madness and chaos and lies and just damage that has been done to Julian Assange and untangle almost a decade's worth of a web of shit just to get to the root of the matter. And we're getting to it right now in this interview. You say that the Swedish authorities were never interested in testimony from Assange, but the media and government agencies have painted a completely different picture over the years. Julian Assange, they say, fled the Swedish judiciary in order to avoid being held accountable. Melzer, that's what I always thought until I started investigating. Andrew couldn't be more right. You scratch the surface a little bit and it all falls apart. The opposite is true. Assange reported to the Swedish authorities on several occasions because he wanted to respond to the accusations, but the authorities stonewalled. Melzer apparently speaks fluent Swedish, which is, a bonus, I would imagine.
Yes, which is also why he was able to talk about the nature of the definition of how rape is defined in Swedish law, and it differs greatly from our interpretation, and has since evolved over the years as well. But that's a good point. He is able to speak about that investigation in a very with a lot of authority, because he does know the language and understands the nature of exactly what that means in that location or in that country.
No, you're absolutely right. And what he came to find out, that has all of the documents in his possession, all of the emails, all of the text messages. He comes to find out that A, rape had never taken place at all, and B, the woman's testimony was changed by the Stockholm police without her involvement in order to somehow make it sound like a possible rape. Now, here is where what Taylor was talking about. Julian Assange was never accused of rape. She declined to participate in further questioning and went home. 2 hours later, a headline appeared on the front page of Expressen, Swedish tabloid, saying he was suspected of having committed 2 rapes.
Which, by the way, they are not allowed to put that into the public sphere I think, initially. So they were actually wrong to even publish that, which is further evidence that this was all to sabotage Assange and his career and invalidate his work through WikiLeaks. I believe they have to conduct an investigation first, or they have to notify him first. He found out about this through that Swedish tabloid.
Yeah, and look, let's be honest. If you're getting your news from an outlet that exists because it wants to be sensationalist, the first thing you should do is look into it a little bit further. Like, we have all of the tools that we need in front of us. We have the world's biggest encyclopedia right here at our fingertips, and a little bit of research goes a very long way, especially when you have a site like WikiLeaks, especially when there's the IC watch, so you can figure out who has an intelligence background when you're communicating with people online. Here's a breakdown of what happened. A woman walks into a police station. She doesn't want to file a complaint, but wants to demand an HIV test. The police decide this could be a case of rape and a matter for public prosecutors. The woman refuses to go along with that version of events and goes home and writes a friend that it wasn't her intention, but the police want to, quote, get their hands on, unquote, Assange. 2 hours later, the case is in the paper. As we know today, public prosecutors leaked it to the press without even inviting Assange to make a statement. Second woman, who had allegedly been raped according to the August 20th headline, was only questioned on August 21st. Come on. I know there we go. The supervisor of the policewoman who conducted the questioning wrote her an email telling her to rewrite the statement. This is the email right here. I don't speak Swedish. Nils Melzer does. We know that the original statement, according to the chief public prosecutor, apparently did not contain an indication that a crime had been committed. In the edited form, it says the two had sex several times, but in the morning, according to the revised statement, the woman woke up because he tried to penetrate her without a condom. She asked, "Are you wearing a condom?" "No, you better not have HIV. Let him continue." Like, this is the entire investigation is built on absolutely nothing, but the timing is clearly decisive. In late July, WikiLeaks, in cooperation with the New York Times, The Guardian, and Der Spiegel, published the Afghan War Diaries. It was one of the largest leaks in the history of the U.S. military. The U.S. immediately demanded that its allies inundate Assange with criminal cases. We aren't familiar with all of the correspondence, but Stratfor, a security consultancy that works for the U.S. government, advised American officials to apparently deluge Assange with all kinds of criminal cases for the next 25 years. This includes honeypots. There are a bunch of different emails in the global intelligence files that talk about this.
So I sent you guys a message in the chat because I can't repeat it on the Vigil, but I think that her line of questioning is like really strange. Like how her recalling of those events that took place to me just seems really odd and like just unnatural to take place. I know that's besides the point, but I just find it to be super weird. And I think when you're looking for somebody's credibility, you look if they've been consistent in their statements, and you look if things that they do are just odd or unusual. And I think it's just very odd how she describes this encounter. You know, sometimes it's, in my opinion too, we have to talk about these issues. Sometimes I struggle with, and I'm curious what you guys think, sometimes I struggle with, are we talking about this too much to the point where we're almost like rehashing on smears? Not that we're doing the smearing, but just having to, just where's the fine line in how you sort of know that you're not harping on something too much. Do you follow what I'm saying? I think it's like easy to get in, to feel like that.
Oh, definitely. But I think with especially this case in particular, it's so important to keep that core focus of if Julian Assange is extradited, we all lose free speech, if in America, if not globally, for those who have it currently.
Right. And you know what was interesting too, Andrew, real quick, when I spoke with his attorney, Barry Pollock, which that interview is on Action for Assange, you guys can find it. He told me, this impacts more than just journalists. This impacts everybody because everybody's right to know is going to be severely impaired and impacted or impacted by this case. So, you may think, oh, well, I'm not a journalist. I'm not somebody who is publishing government documents or sensitive information. Why would I care about Julian Assange? Well, you should, because it ultimately impacts your ability to know what's wrong with our governments and therefore your ability to hold them accountable and to see any real positive change.
No, it's cool, and it's really, really incredible that you were able to make it to DC on a weekday. Go ahead and make it to the press club. I love the moment that you finish your statement.
I was scared.
I love the look on that lady. Is that the ex spook?
All right, so I want to make it very clear right now, the Courage Foundation put on a fantastic event. I looked into the backgrounds and the people there were wonderful. Like, they were so kind. I met Nathan Fuller, who is the director of the Courage Foundation. He is a wonderful person, and they are a wonderful organization. I did say that there is a video of me addressing this panel, and I did look at everybody around me, and I said, I condemn the corporate media's failure to talk about this issue, to talk about Julian Assange. If I could rephrase it today, I would have said, I call upon the corporate media to talk about Julian Assange. It would have been a little bit more welcoming, a little bit more inviting, and I should have done that. But I basically really made, I think, quite a statement, I guess. And I think it was met with some hostility from one of the panelists in particular. And Steve took a screenshot of their reaction to after I spoke. And one of the one woman in particular who answered my question, I think was shocked that at what I had said. She was working at the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. Like, she was working there, but she's an American, which makes me wonder what her role was there. I don't think that was made too clear, but she was there, and she had some ties to intelligence as well. You could look up all their bios online. Steve, don't you want to say I did a great job?
You did a fantastic job. I had you on my show that day.
Yeah,
I did. We have a full interview of that. You were also on Graham Elwood's show. There's a full interview of it there. No, you did. It was
yeah. I forgot to mention I was on Steve's show as well.
Soon. You what? I'm sorry. I was trying to find the screenshot the whole time. I finally got it. Let me blow it up here. We can put it on screen. No, it was a good statement. If I had it, if I had known we were gonna go and do this, I would have pulled it up, because I think I gave you the time.
Oh, you know what? I wish we could play it for everybody. Josh, is there any way we could do that, or is that too much? I'm sorry. I know it's.
He could screen share into Zoom from his end, and it should work.
Okay, because I want to show you guys what I had said.
I'm pulling up the panel right now, though.
Okay.
And there they are.
Yeah, that was after I asked a question. And again, guys, okay, I think Josh needs a link for that video from the Courage Foundation. Yeah, so again, like I said, guys, instead of like saying I condemn the corporate media, I should have said I call out, and that's just a overall, I think, better strategy for this. I didn't think of that at the time, but That's another thing too, is that this is really something hard for me. I can say at least, well, not really hard, but something that it was hard for me to understand at first. We are unfortunately going to have to overcome one thing, and that is we are going to have to welcome people into this movement who at one time maybe held some really horrible views about Julian Assange or have said some really horrible things about Julian Assange. We're going to have to want to embrace those people and get them on our side, and hope that they do. So that's just something to think about that I didn't think about before. And that is coming from me only. I'm not speaking for everyone here.
Yeah, and we actually that have been discussing behind the scenes like a larger change in tactics for the way that we engage multiple different communities and things like that, because we do put ourselves in a very awkward situation trying to build a community and build networks with creators to be able to disseminate truthful information, but at the same time hold people accountable. So one of the things that we're going to do is called the Who's Next or Your Next campaign. Still flushing it out, but more or less what we'd like people to get involved with and what we're going to start doing some videos for is taking articles out of the mainstream media, historical articles from the last couple of years or current articles, and showing how it's a violation of the Espionage Act and telling these journalists and these reporters from the UK and from Australia and from the United States and all of these different countries, like, hey, we thank you for putting yourselves out there and being willing to be extradited by not speaking up for Julian Assange, or certain things along that route where we put it in their face that if he gets taken to the United States, you can be taken to the United States. And so I think branding it that way reaches people way more efficiently and effectively, because no one wants to be the bad journalist unless they're paid to be. And most of those people have already revealed themselves.
Right now, we were trying to pull up my question that I asked the Courage Foundation because I really want you guys to see it. I believe it's at an hour in.
Okay,
I think somebody else is gonna have to pull it up though.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that, but to Andrew's point, you're absolutely right. The people who are in independent media to kind of gatekeep and sheep herd people back into the Democratic Party are going to make themselves more and more known. That's going to become more clear as we go through a rigged primary, as we go through the extradition hearing of Julian Assange. It will become much more obvious. And I think I'm ready to share the screen. Hopefully this is where we
I think it's an hour in. Yeah. I first want to thank the Courage Foundation for hosting.
Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta share audio.
This is so fun. Oh my God.
There we go.
I think it's so important that we do talk about this. And I do want to ask you all a question about how the New York Times and The Guardian both published the same information that Julian Assange and his staff had published through WikiLeaks. They are not facing any criminal charges. However, I do want to be clear that I am not in favor of them being charged. Of course, I'm not. However, I find it peculiar that one publisher is being charged, another is not. And also, I want to take this moment to condemn the American corporate media's failure to talk about this case and their misreporting on this case, and for their smears and for repeating CIA talking points about Julian Assange. Free Assange.
There you go.
Yeah.
And they sat there dumbstruck for a minute before they started to like mutter through it.
Yeah.
It was a 2-hour event, and they were like, "Okay, we're only going to take one more question."
After I asked that question, yes, they were like, "Okay, one more question." That was it. But I felt, again, like I've said a million times, I felt like I could have rephrased that last statement. But when you're at these events, actually, what happened too was after I said that, somebody else spoke, and I felt like I may have empowered other people to stand up and to maybe show support for Julian, because there was a lot of support for him in that room, which was super cool. But people starting to call out maybe some of the misinformation that's been spread about him. And overall, the attorneys on that panel were concerned about this. In all seriousness, they were concerned about him being extradited here and the legal precedent that would set for journalists. We could talk about it all day long and say this will set a bad precedent, but when it comes from high-profile attorneys, it's granted a lot more weight.
Could we play your interview with one of Julian's attorneys too? Because
yes,
that's
it's an honor.
Most people may have seen it by now, but they almost never engage with the media. So that interview is one of the first ones that has come out for Julian's attorneys in the last couple of years. Or not last couple of years, but last couple of months.
It'll take me a minute to grab it, but I will grab it. So in the meantime, fill space.
Okay.
What I'm hoping too is that we can actually get them while you guys are in London, everything coordinated enough that when they come out of the courtroom and out of Belmarsh, that they'd come and talk with us first, or we would be in the press pool to be able to ask them questions. So that's something that I'm working with a couple people to try to make sure we can get those kinds of videos out too, because the words from their attorneys are so powerful, because these are like some of the smartest legal people in the fucking world.
Yeah, I was surprised and very grateful that Barry Pollock, Julian's U.S. attorney, was willing to speak with me. And he was willing to talk. He was such a nice person and very knowledgeable. He was willing to speak with anybody. Like, he was talking to other people, just having a conversation, not even an interview after this event. And then I asked him if I could interview him, and he said yes. So I went for it. I didn't expect him to say yes, but I thought it was worth trying. And I'm glad that I did.
And as we're getting that pulled up too, just an awesome announcement. We're going to be coordinating with People for Assange over in Australia. They have an event going on in downtown Sydney on February 24th, the first day of Julian's extradition hearing. And so hopefully, if we can get everything coordinated and planned out right, our streaming session will actually start that Sunday when it's the 24th their time. And we'll be able to go from the Sydney protest to the London protest to the DC protests, all within a few hours of each other on stream. So I think that's a really, really cool connection that we just built. And then Michelle and Danielle, the organizers for People for Assange, are going to set something up to be able to actually come on stream with us afterwards to talk about what they did during the day.
So right now we have my interview after the Courage Foundation event at the Press Club, National Press Club in DC. This is Julian Assange's U.S. Attorney Barry Pollock.
Hi everyone, I'm Taylor Hudak, co-founder of Action for Assange, an independent journalist. Right now I'm at the National Press Club in DC for an event that was held by the Courage Foundation about the prosecution of Julian Assange and specifically the dangers associated with that and what we can expect if he is extradited and tried and convicted in the US. I'm joined by Julian Assange's attorney, Barry Pollock, so thank you so much for doing this interview.
Sure, Taylor.
For somebody who's maybe not so familiar with this case, why people should be very concerned, especially if you're a journalist?
Well, I think you should be very concerned if you're a journalist, because what this prosecution is doing is making it criminal to publish truthful information simply because the government considers that information to be classified information or national defense information. And journalists every day publish information that the government considers to be privileged. I think you should be very very concerned about this prosecution if you're not a journalist, because what the First Amendment is about is it's not just about the right to publish, it's about our right to know. And what this prosecution is saying is when somebody has published truthful information that has told you what the United States government is doing, what it's doing in our name, that the government can come after that person criminally. And if they're allowed to do that, then obviously people aren't going to publish, and we're not going to know what the government is doing. These publications involve very newsworthy events and things that are very much in the public's interest to learn.
Why do you think the corporate media in America has failed to stand up for Julian Assange, one of their own essentially, because the outcome of his case could very well impact their work?
Well, I think that it may be a bit of an overstatement to say across the board the media is not stood up. I think that I personally am disappointed that we haven't had more journalists speaking out more strongly, more loudly. But there have been journalists that have spoken out and spoken out consistently. David McGraw, who's the general counsel of the New York Times, has for years been talking about the threat to mainstream journalism that is caused by even the threat of prosecuting Assange, much less now that it's actually happened.
In fairness, the New York Times has been spreading misinformation, unfortunately.
And again, like I say, it is a mixed bag. The New York Times, like any organization, is made up of any number of people. And there are reporters at the New York Times who I think have been better on this issue, and there are reporters at the New York Times that have been worse, and then you have people on the editorial board. So it's hard to paint with a broad brush. What I think is most significant is how is this conversation going to take place going forward? I do think that this indictment charging a journalist with 17 counts of violating the Espionage Act has been a wake-up call to a lot of mainstream journalists. And in the panel tonight where you had First Amendment experts speaking about the topic, they said that one thing that's going to be crucial going forward is how journalists report on the extradition, how they report on the prosecution if it happens. And I believe that over time, journalists will recognize that this is a threat to what they do, whether they're working for corporate media, working for independent media, that on this issue, they share an interest, and that is to push back on the idea that the government can make somebody subject to potential life in prison for publishing truthful information.
Now, I know that another member in the audience did ask about the latest interpretation of the Constitution, the First Amendment. The First Amendment does not apply to a foreign national. However, the Espionage Act of 1917 does. Do you agree with that interpretation?
No, absolutely not. What that was a reference to is the United States government in the extradition proceedings in the UK has tried to stake out the position that somehow the First Amendment doesn't apply to a foreign nation. I don't think that will stand up in court here if the case ever gets here, nor should it, because as I said before, the First Amendment is not just about the publisher, it's about U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens are the ones who learned what the United States government was doing. For example, one of the publications included what's been called the collateral murder video, where U.S. troops gunned down a number of civilians, including 2 staffers for Reuters News. The world would never have learned about that. The United States citizens would never have learned about that if WikiLeaks hadn't published it. So the First Amendment protects us as citizens, and I think that a U.S. court will recognize that. Whether the speaker is an Australian citizen or an American citizen, it doesn't matter. What they're doing is they're publishing truthful information that is in the interest of U.S. citizens to know.
All right, and one last question here. One thing that very much concerns me and many people who care about human rights and see the clear violations that have been taking place in this case, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, has officially reported since May, I believe, that Julian Assange has been subjected to torture while living in the Ecuadorian Embassy and while he has been in Belmarsh prison. How does that play out in this case as well?
So there had been a finding by the UN that he was subjected to an unlawful detention in the embassy and under conditions that amounted to torture, and there has now been a finding that continues with respect to his conditions in Belmarsh prison. I certainly hope and expect that's something that the UK courts will take into account in deciding whether or not to extradite.
All right, Barry Pollock, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, come on.
Dr. Squatch is the best smelling, best feeling soap on the planet.
That was an excellent interview, Taylor. You killed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I thought you got to take this moment because many people don't have the opportunity to get information public that from his attorneys who know this case better than anybody else. Oftentimes on these vigils, we're asked questions that we simply cannot answer, or we could give like a limited opinion on it because we're not legal experts and we're not members of his legal team. So I thought it was important. Again, like I said, I'm pretty sure I will be at that event in New York. So if you're in New York on Saturday, February 15th, and you can make it, do make it. These events are awesome. Max Blumenthal is going to be speaking. I'm really, really excited to hear him speak about this case. And also some other attorneys will be. So do come to that if you're able to.
They have one in LA on the 9th too,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, they have one at UCLA February 9th. I've reached out to some friends and colleagues in LA and encouraged them to go. I'm not sure if they will, if they can make it or not, but if you are in the LA area.
Jimmy brought it up on his stream last night, or tonight,
oh,
actually.
we did? Excellent.
He
Yeah, because I
brought up
tagged
going out
them
there.
in this, and but they're going to be on a show, I think, because we tagged them. Yeah.
Yeah, there hopefully will be enough, hopefully enough creators out there that someone can get there. It's just a matter of trying to.
I would like to. I don't know if I can swing it, but I would like to.
If you could,
there's
that
another
would be awesome.
event following day.
That would be great.
There's another one the following day at Sonoma State University, which is in Rohnert Park, California, and a little bit north of San Francisco.
So to give them credit, Julian actually, I don't want to say he wasn't a fan of, but he released a pretty funny picture. I don't know if Steve has it, about the board meeting of the National Press Club.
Not on my laptop. No, I would have to. Oh, maybe. I guess I could grab it before the end of the show.
But so we'll try to pull it up. But either way, I just wanna give them a thank you, for putting that together. It was championed by the Courage Foundation.
Freedom of the Press Foundation.
Yeah, but they use that space there is what I mean. And so like I just want to give them a thank you for that, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guys, I know many of you have talked about the audio quality in that interview. I know it's poor. I'm going to be fixing that from now on and having a better way to manage that. A lot of the stuff is going to be filmed on my phone, but there are ways to make sure that we're not picking up loud noises. So I apologize about that audio. I could probably think about getting a transcript of that for you guys, and especially for people who may really have a hard time hearing, so everybody can have access to this information.
So
sorry, I'm still trying to find this thing.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say, do we want to move into the back into the Parliamentary Assembly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me go ahead and pull that up.
Okay.
And I have a number of screenshots to make it a little bit easier. But I put them all in an email and sent them to Josh, and Kevin got his computer.
So I've been reaching out to different press clubs around the world, and different free press organizations, basically just asking them to stand in solidarity with Julian. Once I kind of finish up and have like a more solid cleaned up list, I'm actually going to post the list that I have and that I've been putting together on our website. So that way other people can reach out and encourage these organizations to support Julian and Chelsea and Jeremy and all the other whistleblowers as well. So I just want to encourage people to take the initiative to literally just Google free press organizations, open up a whole bunch of tabs with them, and start sending them contacts and emails, because no one's going to reach out for Julian on Julian's behalf if we don't. Like, we are the people watching this stream, the ones that know what's going on the most and the ones that are the most aware and involved and engaged. So I just ask that even if it's only like 10, 15 emails that you reach out to a couple different free press clubs, maybe the different, what are those things called that you were working on earlier, Taylor? Are those the press clubs, or is that something different?
Are you talking about my initiative from like a long time ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was press clubs. And now that's why I was really surprised that the National Press Club was willing to hold that Courage Foundation event, because at first I reached out to Cleveland and they weren't very nice about, or not nice, it wasn't they weren't nice, but they were not at all willing to hear me out and to issue a statement in support of Julian Assange. However, if they knew that the National Press Club of DC was willing to hold this event, other press clubs around the country and around the world may be very willing to change their mind.
Yeah. And it's efforts like that that just make a little bit of a difference, because someone has to sit down and read to that email and respond to that email, and then they are in organizations specifically built for the defense of the free press. So I think trying to get something like that started up again, but doing it on a larger global scale would be really cool.
All right, I'm just pulling up the piece from Courage Foundation on this. This is a draft resolution from the Parliamentary Assembly for the Council of Europe. The acronym is PACE. Does somebody else want to take the cold read on this?
Yeah, I got it. Without the right to freedom of expression and a free, independent, and pluralistic media, there is no true democracy. The Council of Europe and its Parliamentary Assembly are firmly committed to strengthening media freedom and in all aspects, including the right to access information, to protect the protection of sources, the protection against searches of professional workspaces and private houses, and the seizure of materials, the safeguard of editorial independence, and the ability to investigate, criticize, and contribute to public debate without fear of pressure or interference. The safety of journalists and other media actors is a fundamental component of this freedom. Under the European Convention of Human Rights, particularly but not only Article 10, member states have a positive, can you scroll up?
Yes.
A positive obligation to establish a sound legal framework for journalists and other media actors to work safely. However, threats, harassment, legal and administrative restrictions, and undue political and economic pressures are widespread. Worse still, in some countries, journalists who investigate affairs involving corruption or abuses of power, or who merely voice criticism of political leaders and governments in power, are physically attacked, arbitrarily imprisoned, tortured, or even murdered. In all respects, the Assembly also refers to its Resolution 2293/2019, Defrain Kaliza's assassination and the rule of law in Malta and beyond, ensuring that the whole truth emerges. According to the information published by the Council of the European Platform to promote the protection of journalism and safety of journalists, the platform, from 2015 to 25 November 2019, 26 journalists have been killed, including 22 cases where there have been impunity, and 109 journalists are currently in detention. 638 serious press freedom violations have been perpetrated in 39 countries. Threats to media freedom and the safety of journalists have become so numerous, repeated, and serious that they jeopardize not only citizens' rights to be properly informed, but also the stability and smooth function of the democratic process. And that's exactly what we're witnessing. And they're not describing third world countries. I mean, they are in some respects, but everything that they're saying literally describes the actions of the United States and actions taken against United States journalists.
Those numbers are incredible. Look, 26 murdered journalists and 22 murdered with impunity. That I had no recourse whatsoever, just dead reporter. And that's something that we as independent media need to be pointing out to our colleagues and need to, stress that you have to speak more about Julian Assange. You have to bring to light the precedent that this is going to set. You have to bring to light to make your audience aware, make yourself aware of the threat that the biggest press freedom trial in history in the world that we've ever had affects them very personally, affects them not only in their ability to create their content or sustain their existence off of their content, but it is a threat to their personal freedom and liberty.
Yeah, it is. And another challenge I see with this case is they're saying that the First Amendment does not apply to foreign nationals. So that is going to be extremely difficult moving forward to then argue that, okay, if you're in the US, then you could publish, like if Julian Assange was an American citizen, then would he be able to publish this information and get away with it? I highly doubt that they would be okay if he was an American citizen. So that's an interesting take on the legal aspects of this case and the interpretation of what the First Amendment means. Another thing too, like his attorney said that he did not agree with that assessment, which was made in the British courts in the most recent hearing.
So I want to jump down on this a little bit to the Assembly's actual call to action here. And let me do the thing with the thing and the share. So therefore, the Assembly calls on member states to protect more effectively the safety of journalists and media freedom. In this connection, they must fully implement recommendation CM Rec 2016-4, whatever that means, we should look that up, on the protection of journalism and safety of journalists and other media actors. Carry out effective, independent, and prompt investigations into any crimes against journalists, such as killings, attacks, or ill treatment, and bring to justice authors, instigators, perpetrators, and accomplices who are responsible under the law, ensuring that there is no impunity for attacks against journalists. Set up national mechanisms consistent with the UN Plan of Action on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity, ensuring that such mechanisms are designed and implemented under strong political and operational leadership with proper interagency coordination and in genuine partnership with civil society, notably journalists, associations, and trade unions, and media freedom watchdog organizations. This is evidently reiterating a lot of what they've talked about in the UN, but for the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe to come out and say this at this particular time is vital, because hopefully it gets movement in the I guess in the ruling class or the professional class that we as lowly activists are hard pressed to get access to. And it sucks that people who are in the mainstream, who are part of this mockingbird media, are ultimately going to have to be driven to come into the light on this issue. But in order for tens of or hundreds of millions of people to become educated on this, it's one of those things that is going to have to happen. What do you guys think of that, and what is in this?
Are we talking about getting journalists on the side of Julian Assange?
In relation to what the resolution is saying, what they're calling for, and what they're trying to get across to the public at large, because that message wasn't necessarily, our draft resolution isn't necessarily for activists. It's for everyone in the professional class to kind of shake them awake that these particular violations is flat out war on the truth and on journalism and on whistleblowers and on publishers who would dare print the material that's been bravely given to them is happening right now.
Yeah, I think that we just need to reiterate to everybody that this impacts them. I think people respond better and want to do something if it personally impacts them, especially if you are an American. Something has to personally impact and personally affect us for us to understand that it is an issue, and then for us to want to actually do something about it. That's just my perspective. I see that also with many other issues, but we have to reiterate to people that your ability to know information and therefore solve issues and be able to vote with knowledge is going to be severely impacted by this case, because you won't have that information. You won't have access to it. It'll be illegal to print it.
The dog and pony show that's going on with the Democratic primary right now makes me suspicious that we may be on our way out of elections. They get rid of the press freedom. If they clamp down on journalists' ability to print information the government doesn't like or embarrasses them, we're not too many steps away from canceling elections and just installing people.
Yeah, and all it'll take is one manufactured incident. Like,
Yep.
they literally could have blamed Iowa on the Russians and fully given our voting infrastructure to the Department of Defense, which is what they were trying to do post 2016 because of the Russians. So people
Well, they
have
already
to.
get, look, they already, the Iowa Democratic Party already ceded control of counting out the results of the caucus to the DNC. Like, that's a thing that's been reported on multiple times now. They just,
And how often has that happened before? Like, is it normal for the DNC to step in?
no, it is not normal for that. The state party goes through, and the state party has a number of precinct captains and other officials and second party observers, and there is normally a process that is played out for over 100 years now, where it's the state party that controls and runs and tallies the elections.
So I don't.
Democratic National Committee.
Do we want to talk more about Iowa, or do we want to get back to the news? Because I was gonna just talk about like the state of the Democratic Party in Ohio.
Go for it.
So, I'm part of the Green Party of Ohio. I'm a state central committee member. So I just want to put that out front before I talk about anything like specific about politics, and especially in the state of Ohio. But the Democratic Party in Ohio is so hollow and vacant that they can't find candidates to run for elections in districts that it should just be a layup. It's to the point that almost all state parties are bankrupt, and they rely on the influx of corporate money through victory fund PACs and things like that, through essentially money laundering, to be able to fund their infrastructure. And the way that they're trying to manipulate the political process right now is by continuing to just squeeze people out so that way they feel disenfranchised. And I'm not someone who thinks you can just reform the Democratic Party, but basically what they're trying to do is make it so that way there is no viable competition to the national security state within our politics system. Because whether you trust Bernie Sanders, I personally don't, but he literally rips the face off of the rigged process because it's something that everyone pays attention to. So I'll give him credit where credit is due for that. But on a large scale, if it wasn't for his injection of lifeblood, there wouldn't be a Democratic Party in 2020 right now. And while to some extent that sounds wonderful, we already exist in a one-party state. And where we have this completely hollow political
I've
party.
said that for a while too. You're right.
Yeah. And it's moving closer and closer to literally just having one political party because the Democrats are so hollow, to where they have to create these essentially intelligence apparatus superstars to get people to support them and believe in them, while at the same time those superstars pass pay-go and literally just sell out at the first chance that they get because power among war criminals is a very important thing. So what I'm trying to say is something needs to get built for when that infrastructure of the Democratic Party is completely collapsed and no longer even viable for a progressive or independent candidate to run within. Because all that's going to happen is we're going to end up with literal one political party left in this country. And I don't think anyone wants the Republicans to be the only party left.
No, no, we don't want that. But that's what it is. It drives me nuts when people say that Ohio is a purple state. And I know that what they mean by that, but it is not a purple state. It is not. It's a red state. But
The Democrats haven't had a majority in the state house and state senate in decades. Like, our state legislature is so red that they've literally ran out of bills to pass. Like, they went as far as to pass the fetal heartbeat bill because they didn't have any right-wing bills left to pass to run on to get support for, because they had such control they could just lay them up whenever they wanted. So whoever thinks Ohio's a battleground state's literally just never looked into the political process here. Because ever since they fucked over Dennis Kucinich so many times, there's not progressive energy left in the party that isn't being brought in by the candidates that are currently trying to revive this fucking zombie dinosaur.
They did it again in 2018 to Dennis Kucinich.
Yep. And as a response, right? As a response to the co-chair of the Green Party giving up his position to vote for Dennis Kucinich in the primary, because in Ohio, when you vote in a primary, it changes your political affiliation. So he had to pull a Democratic ballot, which by the rules of the Green Party bylaws removed him from the chair position. He had used the Columbus Free Press as a platform for Kucinich, and he turned his back on the Green Party. Constance Goodell Newton, who was actually on Jimmy Dore and Jamal Thomas's show, was running and got to get into events because we worked super hard to get her on stage with these people. And in the last leg of the primary, half of the events, Kucinich just went after her for even trying to participate, when he's the one that's literally allowing this system to still exist the way it is. And instead of uniting with ideologically similar people, he just turns his back because he has more to gain by losing as a Democrat than potentially trying to win as a Green Party member or an independent, for that sake.
Yeah, no, you're right. He's been mentoring Tulsi Gabbard now for a while, which I found out recently, and I got a kick out of that, because he really does have like incredible, informed and necessary plans. He's got a good vision. Kucinich does. It's just the machinations as they are. They're set up to prevent a guy like they're set up to prevent Tulsi Gabbard. Whatever you may think about Bernie, they're doing their damnedest to keep him out of office. And
yeah. And I don't get why he isn't like screaming about this. And again, I'm not criticizing him, but it's happening again.
It's because he thinks the better gamble is to gain power among war criminals than it is to gain power from the people.
He's asking for more donations, and that's not going to solve the problem.
Right, because all that happens in times like this, when he doesn't stand up to address these issues, is less and less people support him, because it shows that he's not willing to fight back against the people that are causing the problems. And if an app is supposed to be the solution, 4 years ago, he could have addressed the election corruption. And 4 years ago, we could have been getting rid of this problem before it even happened.
Which is one reason, and we're going to move on, but which is one of the reasons why we say that he is not going to magically stand up to the intelligence community and free Julian Assange if he's not going to, that's just because there's evidence on his past behavior suggesting that is not going to happen, and we'll leave it at that. We talked about it.
And I just want to be clear, because I am really critical. I would love for him to stand up for Assange.
Well, of course, we all
I'm
want
not
that.
trying to push him away from doing that, but there is no there is no pressure to have him do that because people are willing to accept whatever decision is made because it's the plan. And whether you trust the plan on the right or the plan on the left, like either way, we're getting put in the meat grinder.
What the plan is to keep people voting inside of a duopoly that doesn't represent at least 80-90% of us. You know, like there is a fair amount of the country that is of the professional class that does not give a shit if people die for lack of health care or are homeless. What they're most concerned about is not having their goddamn taxes go up because they need more stuff.
Right. You're exactly right, Steve. There's a big part of that in this country that we don't talk about enough.
Bernie Sanders is a threat to those people,
Right.
but at the same time, he's the savior of the goddamn Democratic Party. And if the party machinery would realize this, he will have people voting Democrat until the world literally burns or collapses from climate catastrophe, or you know, like.
And I'm of the persuasion that that's the intention.
Yeah, me too.
Is that it's just a political show to control opposition, to get them to the finish line for insert whatever reason and thing that they're trying to capture. So that's.
Yeah. So
But
either
at the
way,
same time, I wouldn't be here in this seat doing this right now if it wasn't for Bernie Sanders and me being involved in his 2016 campaign. So credit where credit is due, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, he was asking for more donations. I don't know. I don't want to keep criticizing or anything like that, but we would just like to see him step it up, I guess. But it's very clear what's happening. Very obvious. So I do worry about that. And looking ahead, Andrew, you have a great point of, you know, is this the end of our electoral process? Because I don't remember anything like this happening where they're flipping coins for delegates.
Oh, they did that last time too. They did that in 2016. Hillary Clinton won 6 out of 6 coin tosses. The odds of that happening are you have like a 1.75% chance of flipping a coin 6 times and getting it to go your way 6 times. She magically did it. Like,
that's a higher percentage than Elizabeth Warren is Native American.
It is a much higher percentage than.
That was good, Andrew.
Yeah.
That was good.
It's a cartoon. Like, did you guys see the video? I'll even try and find it. I know Jimmy played it earlier. But of the guy flipping the coin, where he takes it, lands in his hand, and he's like, oh, and flips it over and then shows. I'll find the video. Like, we're gonna stay on this for a minute because it's just so brazen.
And as you're pulling that up, I'm gonna talk about decentralized activism for a minute as we're finding that video. Because a lot of what we talk about is a lack of accountability, and that we know all of these things and we see all of these things going on, but there's no one in a position of authority to hold these people accountable. So what we ask people to do here is be the person to try to hold these people accountable. Be the one person in your town doing a protest. Be the one person in your town passing out flyers or putting up posters or going to your city's community events and just walking up and shaking people's hands and saying, hey, did you know what's going on with our free speech right now? And just make human connections with people in your community and explain to them what is going on. And you'll find people that want to get involved with you. And before you know it, you'll have 3 or 4 people that are showing up to shake people's hands and ask people if they know about what's going on with the war on free speech right now. So be that spark, be the fire that sets the fuel off in your community, so to speak, to actually get people aware and engaged, not just on this issue, but for the things that will also benefit your community.
My computer is very angry at me right now. I have a frozen screen. I don't even know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear and see you.
Yeah, actually, you're pretty good.
Okay. Screen froze there for a minute. I will be able to pull this back up in a
Hey, Andrew, do you have, I guess, I don't know why I'm asking you this on this show, but you have wristbands for everybody in DC? I'll order some.
I don't have any wristbands.
Okay, I'm going to order some so
Okay,
you can give
cool.
them out.
I actually, so to
what's
shout
a
somebody out
wristband?
where I got this wristband from, LB the
Yeah.
Realist, LBTHA Realist. It's a small creator on YouTube, puts videos out when he can. I actually need to send him some wristbands because he does like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and like that kind of shit. And he passes his out there to get followers locally. And I think that's a
Oh.
really cool way to kind of cross market, like make some money doing some shit like that, and then also pass out information if that's something that you're involved with already.
Cool. And then Steve, I'm just going to bring them with me to London because I know I've been saying I'm going to send them, but I might as well just bring them to you because we're going to see each other. And
They're gonna get taken by customs. You're not allowed to
Right?
use silicone.
oh, I'd be so mad. Why would they do that? That's ridiculous.
All right. Well, hopefully my computer allow this to happen.
We're working. It's loading.
Right. Come on, you son of a bitch.
There we go.
Well, no, it's not letting the video play.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. Let me. Shit.
RSFO, thank you. I saw your message. Thank you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take it off of the share screen for a minute and let my computer, maybe not crap out on me right in the middle of a show. I'd be two of it, three of us that have been getting hit on the computer, friend. Your Wi-Fi was messed up earlier, Taylor. Or you weren't coming in clear at all.
No.
This has been a Kevin'd up stream tonight.
right. We're gonna actually have to go back and release Eva's part separately because there was a good almost 10 minutes in there where we didn't have anything up online but kept the interview going. So
Mhm.
it may come up in the full show. It may not, like when YouTube decides to put the video up, but we do have the recording behind the scenes here too. So we'll still make sure that we can at least get that to you guys.
All right.
Does chat have any questions?
Yeah, if there's any questions in the chat, please go ahead and throw them out right now. And I'm still attempting to.
Can I paste the link to LB's channel? Yeah. Give me 1 second to get it pulled up RSFO.
Yeah, so leave us your questions in the chat. Remember that we have some big plans coming up for this full extradition hearing, which begins February 24th. Steve and I will be in London covering this with Tariq Haddad and Gordon Dimmick. And we will be posting videos, writing, but mainly video footage. We'll be reporting, interviewing people all day long, like literally all day long. When we get back home from the hearing, we have a ton of work to do. We're going to be doing like podcast type of thing. And so you'll have a lot of information. We'll be answering all of your questions for that. Remember, if you're in the US at that time, it will be kind of like during the day that will take place for you guys, but it'll be nighttime for us. And thank you for everybody who has supported us in this and who has donated to our GoFundMe. We could not have done this if you guys did not help us and you guys did not support us. So thank you.
And speaking of Tariq Haddad, he will be on my show, Slow News Day, this Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I do that show weekly. It's a 2-hour live stream. Normally I will have 2 guests, but I think that Tariq and I have a lot to talk about, so I'm really looking forward to that interview. And now I will pull up this fucking, watch this. This is democracy in action.
What you're watching right now. And then flip it over. Heads.
That's it. Let's watch that again. Watch it backwards too, maybe. Here we go. Decide this out, bud. This out.
And then flip it over.
Turns it around. Puts it in his hand.
Alright,
so Blue Judge will get 3
How do you find a person that's never flipped a coin before? Like, they're explaining it to him as he's like going to fling it up in the air. Like, what? Did anyone else kind of notice that?
I couldn't really make out the video too well.
You what?
I mean, I couldn't make out the video too well to judge his like movements, but it's just so bizarre, the entire thing. Go ahead.
The coin lands in his hand. He looks at it and then flips it the other way and presents it. Oh, it's heads. And the one woman with the Pete sweatshirt on, she starts clapping, turns around, you know, and then slowly other people start clapping, but it is like an awkward, nobody really gets it. They all know they just saw a rigged coin toss right in front of their faces, but everybody's too polite because they're identity politics neoliberals, and they can't tell the brown kid, hey, you fucked up, bud. That's not how that works.
Yeah,
Welcome to the
Kimber's
show.
saying there's actually a slow motion video of this too.
It's not letting me do it. Real quick, can somebody link Pierce's channel into the show chat? Because I wanted to put his channel up there for people too.
It might take 20 minutes for my computer, but I will do that.
Okay, wait, are you talking about DC Pierce?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I could do it, Steve.
I was trying to get it up, but it wouldn't let me put the link in. My restream chat was going crazy.
So I believe we had something else we wanted to talk about for the news tonight, right?
Yeah, give me a minute.
Okay. So while we're doing that, again, leave us your questions in the chat. If you are able to, we are still raising funds for our GoFundMe. We are almost at our goal. We are just slightly shy of 1,000 bucks to our goal. So if you can donate, that's very helpful to us. And if you can't, that's fine. But also just circulating that link on social media is very helpful. And again, we are grateful for everybody. I can't find it either, Steve. And we're very grateful and thankful for everybody who has donated so far. We are trying to find DC Pierce's channel right now. Christy, our other co-host, is frequently on his channel. They do like weekly segments together, I believe. So do make sure you check that out. I am finding that channel now for you guys.
I just put the link into our Zoom chat.
Okay.
But I can actually pull the next article up because I can.
Okay.
Because I'm running OBS on my side. I wanted to talk about the Belmarsh prisoners and how they're actually organizing civil disobedience.
Yeah.
So I don't
Perfect.
think Stephen Taylor will be able to see this, but I'll read it out a little bit just so everyone can kind of know what's going on. On January 24th, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who was detained in London's Belmarsh prison solely for the purposes of U.S. extradition request, was moved out of solitary confinement. He is now in a wing of the prison where he can interact with other inmates. In a statement, WikiLeaks ambassador Joseph Farrell said, "The move is a huge victory for Assange's legal team and for campaigners who have been insisting for weeks that the prison authorities must end the punitive treatment of Assange." Assange has been charged with 17 counts of the Espionage Act related to the WikiLeaks publications in 2010 and 11. I'm going to skip down a little bit here. Where is it? Also, the evidence has been submitted to the U.S. prosecution that his last hearing indicates that the U.S. government will not apply First Amendment protections to a foreign journalist such as Assange, and that he will be placed under special administrative measures if he is extradited. This would gag him and his attorneys for making public statements in a case, leaving the government to leak its side of the story. It would also put Assange and his lawyers in separate cells with a grill between them, making eye contact and sharing documents impossible. While the SAMS rules prohibit the government from eavesdropping on privileged attorney-client discussions, most lawyers with clients under SAMS assume they are being listened to. Let me skip down here a little bit. Yet ultimately, what halted this violence came from an unexpected place. Fellow inmates inside the prison, which is used to detain murders and those with terrorist offenses, revolted against the prison authorities' mistreatment of Assange and petitioned the prison governor. Craig Murray, the former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, commented on this positive development. It's a truly inspiring story. Julian is finally released from solitary in Belmarsh because other prisoners in the prison were appalled by his treatment and took action on his behalf. This is a small victory for basic humanity, and it took criminals to teach it to the British state. And that to me the craziest fucking thing in the world. And I'm going to pull the article down now. But the simple fact that it's literally taking prisoners to stand up for this man, because no one within the British government's willing to do it. I don't want to say no one, but there's no one in a high enough position of power within the British government to actually make Julian Assange be able to walk free.
What it is an indictment of 99.9% of the rest of the planet, that it took the inmates of Belmarsh to recognize and organize, in Andrew's favorite word, solidarity with Julian Assange. And the result, look at the result. They got him out of freaking solitary. Like, it shows you that when you effectively organize for a cause, you can get something done. And I'm just incredibly impressed with and happy that this is the thing that got him out of solitary. Like, what are they called? Crown Prosecutorial Service and the people who run Belmarsh have been saying in their media over and over, oh no, Julian Assange is being treated fine. There's nothing untoward going on. We're okay. And their own goddamn inmates step up to say, no, you're lying, and here's why, and this is what's going to happen.
I'm sure that made him feel really good. And hopefully, I know he has no contact with outside world, but hopefully that gave him some reassurance that there's a lot of support for him, not only on the inside in Belmarsh prison, but also people who are on the outside and are just activists really fighting hard for him. Hopefully he's able to realize that and maybe feel some hope there, because we know that there's been attempts in the past to shield him from his contact with the outside world, like to a great extent.
They kept him from his lawyers. They kept his mail. They fucking wouldn't let him in anywhere near a computer. It's a deliberate isolation that has been defined by the UN and Amnesty International as a form of torture. And they are 100% guilty of torturing Julian Assange, as well as, I'm sure, freaking hundreds of other inmates. It's the Guantanamo Bay of the United Kingdom. Like, it's not a fucking Club Fed prison.
Right.
So do you guys remember when Julian first got moved into Belmarsh, the video that came out of Julian from inside of it?
Yes.
and how
Yes.
there were reports coming out that Belmarsh had a big problem with cell phones being smuggled in.
Yes.
I want to speculate, even though it's not generally the best thing to do. I guess not even speculate, but just be hopeful that there'll be more guerrilla videos, and maybe even like not an interview, but something of the sort, like something of his perspective given through a recording in Belmarsh.
Yeah, that was interesting. That I remember when that video came out, and
Is that a low-key call to action, Andrew?
I mean, I don't know anyone in Belmarsh, so like I've never spoken directly to them, but I would love for it to be a call to action.
So start a Belmarsh Prison Pal program, and while you're at it, find a way to code into it that guerrilla videos with Julian Assange need to come out with regularity, because that mail will be read. Kevin, close your ears, buddy. We're not talking to you right now.
Unless he could help us get a phone to Julian and Belmarsh. I mean, if Kevin's changed his ways.
Yeah.
Which
Kevin
is actually, I want to, real quick, if I could pick this up. If you're a member of the intelligence community, FBI, NSA, CIA, MI6, whatever the UK and Australian ones are called, and you're watching this right now because you're being paid to do so.
GCHQ, and I can't remember the Australian one. I'm so mad. But I know New Zealand's the GCSB.
So if you're one of those people watching this, you can be a whistleblower. Right? You can come out and give this information, and there is networks of people built to defend you, and people that will come out and support you and help you escape from the torture of the United States government.
We will support you.
Yes. So I want to encourage
point.
anyone observing us from inside of the NSA and other intelligence agencies around the world to please be a whistleblower. I hope that I can spread the revolution there too and get people inside of there acting out in the ways and means that they can.
In all seriousness,
get a watch party started.
Yeah, in all seriousness, though, we do really need to count on good people that are in the intelligence communities. We need to count on those people that have morals, that have a moral compass, to have the courage to stand up and blow the whistle on whatever agency they are working for. That's what we really depend on. And of course, there's a lot of risk that is associated with that, but there's a lot of support out there. The Courage Foundation supports whistleblowers, and that's its purpose. And then there's also other groups like, us, so many people. So we are really hoping to get good people who have this information to provide us with that information.
They just had an Assange Day in Brussels like last week, calling on the Belgian government to recognize Julian as a political prisoner and protect him. His father, John Shipton, went down and accepted the first academic honoris causa at down there in Brussels, because I'm not going to try and read that, on behalf of Julian. So again, in prison, Julian winning yet another award. He won an award from from Catalan. They recognized him with an integrity award. It's just, again, Patrick Henningsen said it the other week. Ray McGovern said it the other week. There is momentum building towards a global recognition, and people all over the planet rising up to speak out for Julian Assange. So I am, as we go into the extradition hearing, the first part of it, because there's another part that starts in May. And I'm not sure if everybody's aware of that, but they did split extradition into two parts. But as we go into this first part, there's momentum. And I feel like that is only going to build regardless of the primary. I think if they're going to just openly rig this thing like they are, people are going to tune out. of the political noise. Either that or the independent media channels that exist as unofficial campaign commercials for their favorite politician are going to have to address and build more momentum and get their audience engaged in what's happening to Julian Assange, because we need WikiLeaks in this election. We need Julian Assange in this election.
Yes. They want him in prison during this election for sure. They do not want WikiLeaks able to operate during this election. And on the note of independent media covering it, we are more than happy to be your source of information for this extradition hearing, because I don't know if anybody else independent that's there besides the four of us. Again, that's me, Steve, Gordon Dimmick, and Tariq Haddad will be your source of that information. And I believe that people in independent media will cover this for sure. I mean, this has been much anticipated. So yeah, we'll be the source of that information. Oh, also too, I saw in the chat a couple times, somebody was bringing up everything that happened in, okay. So someone in the chat was saying that, kept asking about what happened at the Iowa caucus with Dak and Christie. Christie's not here. Obviously, I guess her internet just didn't boot up, unfortunately. So we're not going to talk about that because she is the one to talk about that. She was there, and I'm guessing that she did witness this take place. RT actually covered it in an article that circulated on social media quite a bit. So that's why we're just choosing not to get into that aspect of the Iowa caucus tonight, because she would be the one to best speak about it.
And look, man, I've been in political situations. I've never been to an Iowa caucus, but I've been to a lot of different political functions. It gets heated at the Iowa caucus. We've got videos from 2016 of people just going absolutely ape. That's probably not the best way to communicate your message. I don't know what camp that particular person was in that went after Dak. I don't know where they immediately went to caucus afterwards, but over Julian Assange, over they're supporting Tulsi Gabbard. Like, those two things, Julian Assange and Tulsi Gabbard, were enough to trigger a person to come at him. Like, that's intense. I hope they got it on camera.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do or not, but that just also goes to show how high tensions are here right now. But the fact that it was Julian Assange that they were upset about and Tulsi Gabbard is pretty crazy, to be honest. But I don't know what else we could expect at this point. Guys, is there any other news or certain information that we want to touch on before we close out?
No.
Okay.
Andrew's muted.
Yeah, he is.
I am muted. No, I was just gonna say, just getting out and doing what you can with what you have.
Yeah, and if you're in Southern California, February 9th, UCLA Library, there will be another Courage Foundation event on freedom of the press and the persecution of Julian Assange. There will be another one in NorCal the following Monday, February 10th, at 7 p.m. at Sonoma State University in Rohnert Park, California, February 15th in Queens, right, Taylor?
Correct, at Queens, yes.
Queens, New York. I don't know if there are any more of those events, but these things, and they're having sister events all across Europe too. Nils Melzer just spoke at one the other day. This is the kind of thing that helps galvanize people or at least make them aware of their own need for self-preservation. Because when the legal demons start talking about what's going to happen to you, scrappy young journalist, or what's going to happen to you, senior editor, or what's going to happen to you as the publisher, that's when their ears perk up. So as gross as that is, I'm really, really grateful that they're doing it.
Yeah, I am too. A big thank you to the Courage Foundation. They do a lot of great work, and I think it's great that they were able to hold these events across the nation. I'm going to close out. Guys, I'm going to put in the description, or in the chat right now, a link to my interview with Lee Stranahan. I was on Fault Lines to talk about the Protect Susie campaign for Susie Dawson, and also about this upcoming extradition hearing and the certain events that will be taking place in DC. I'm looking for that link right now. Okay, I have it right here. I'm going to put it in the chat. I want to thank you guys for watching. Make sure you do like this video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, double check that you are subscribed. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody who donated tonight in our super chat that will be going to our trips to London and DC to protest this extradition hearing, and to also cover this extradition hearing, which again is taking place on February 24th. So guys, thank you so much. If you do not know who I am, my name is Taylor Hudak. You can follow me on Twitter at _Taylor Hudak. And also, I urge you all to sign the open letter to protect Susie Dawson. Susie Dawson is a friend of the Vigils and is an individual who worked with Julian Assange while she was still in New Zealand. And Julian did circulate her work and share her work on social media. She is seeking asylum right now, and there is an open letter, asylum in Russia specifically. There is an open letter that you can sign to show support for her. This letter is aimed at NGOs and non-government organizations to become involved in her situation. So just go to protectsusie.com/open letter. And this website, protectsusie.com, has a lot of information about her case. It has a testimony from people who worked with her to talk about why she was being targeted. Again, Susie was a journalist who worked with Julian Assange. And as a result of that, and as a result of her work exposing the corruption of the intelligence agencies in New Zealand, she became a target for that work. She needs our help. So if you support journalists and political dissidents, sign that open letter. Again, that is at protectsusie.com/open letter. And also follow the campaign on Twitter at protectsusie. Thank you guys so much for watching tonight.
My name's Andrew Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. And for anyone who's new here, Action for Assange is a non-legal entity comprised of freely associating individuals. We are fighting to restore free speech, preserve a free press, and ensure liberty for all. We're growing our online presence to ensure the dissemination of accurate information and give a voice to a struggle which the world seems to have forgotten. Our objective is to build a broad coalition of decentralized organizations and individuals to create a leaderless movement dedicated to liberty, nonviolence, and the pursuit of truth. I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. This was a really, really cool stream.
My name is Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find here on the YouTubes by typing in Slow News Day Podcast into the search browser. Please subscribe to the show. Please check out the videos. I have a wide array of interview guests with some amazing conversations. Like I said, Tarek Haddad will be on this Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I don't use mainstream material for the baseline of my content. If I can reach out and get the independent journalist on my show that writes the articles that I frequently source, I absolutely do that. I've got fantastic interviews with Whitney Webb and Elizabeth Voss and a number of other people in independent media. You can find me on the tweeters at Slow News Day Show. There's a Facebook page that exists. There's also a Patreon that exists, patreon.com/Slow News Day. I am going to start uploading more content to that soon. I absolutely promise. Thank you to my co-hosts. Thank you to the people who participated in the chat. You guys rock. We love you. It helps carry the conversation. For the lurkers and the people that are going to watch this later, we love you too. Yeah, just thank you for being a part of this with us. Go out and do an action for Assange. And till next week, good luck to us all.